turned sideways. And he was like moving around with his like arms in his hands, and he started like inching forward towards me.
So he why do you call it a fighting stance?
Well, he was like a fighter, like a ninja or something. I don't know.
Okay, so he's standing there. He turns to like this and starts moving his arms around.
Like that.
Well, show me. What was he doing?
And like I got like this, and he was like making like fighting motions. I don't know. I'm not a fighter. I don't know.
Okay.
It was scary.
Did he have his hands in fists?
Not at that point. They were like, I don't know.
Was he coming at you like this?
And he lunged at me. He came very quickly.
Okay, so he lunged. Was his fist up when he
I
lunged?
don't remember.
So you start shooting, and he does what?
He kept coming at me.
Okay, so then you keep shooting again, and he falls down on his back.
His legs went up in the air.
Okay, where do his legs go?
In the air.
How high in the air?
I don't know.
Do they go over his head?
I don't know if his feet slipped out.
Okay,
And his feet and his legs went up in the air.
and were you still shooting at the time?
I don't remember.
You can have a seat. So after this incident, you claim that you had swelling to your face, right?
Wait a minute. All right, there's the jury. Please close up your notes. Put them on your chair.
Did this prosecutor really just re-victimize Ashley Benefield on the stand? Oh, we're going to go through cross-examination of her testimony in this video. Hello, and welcome to Alexasrewm, where we are not lawyers, we are not medical professionals, we are not law enforcement, we are just people. People who have opinions. Opinions sometimes that agree to disagree about all things going on in the true crime community, including what the heck happened in the Ashley Benefield case. Now, if you have been following me since day one on this journey, yes, Ashley Benefield has been convicted of manslaughter. So not second-degree murder, which was the main charge that the prosecution was really gunning for. We did a whole breakdown of their closing arguments in my last video, as well as the verdict readout, along with the jury polling, which was conducted. So if you want to check out that video, I will include it in the description box below. But with that being said, I don't want to tee this up too much. We're going to dig in, do a final wrap up on this video, on the series. We're going to get through the rest of Ashley's testimony. Trigger warning. If you need to dip out, I am not going to take any personal offense. Please take care of yourself and be kind to others, guys. Please be kind, no matter what your opinion is. If you have nothing nice to say, don't say it at all. And at the end of the day, I believe that two things could be true. Ashley could be a real survivor of DV, much like I believe. But maybe she didn't feel fear for her life in that exact moment that this whole scenario was playing out. So we'll be diving in. We'll be asking questions as we go through cross-examination. And then we'll wrap up with some final thoughts, as well as just getting a couple of additional thoughts from some of the other experts that the defense called. So with that being said, let's dive in.
I would like to just start with a couple of issues. So first, Benefield never punched you ever, correct?
Yeah, I think that's correct.
Doug Benefield never choked you ever.
No.
He never kicked you.
No.
He never pointed a gun at you.
He waved a gun in my direction.
But it was not pointed at you, correct?
It was pointed at me while he was waving it at me.
He never came at you with a knife.
No.
Or a club.
No.
Or a baseball bat.
No.
So there are 30 years difference between you and Doug.
So you see what she's doing here, like right off the gate, and this is my big problem with the prosecution in this case, because I can understand you. There are two ways you could play it. You could play it where you, and this is why I believe the prosecution believes their theory that she's making everything up. Because if they didn't believe that, I think that they could have taken a more sympathetic angle where, yes, it is possible for her, again, for two things to be true, for Ashley Benefield to be a DV survivor at the hands of Douglas Benefield. Maybe he is a human piece of shit stain. Like, it seems like that from me, and not just from the evidence that's been presented in this case necessarily, but also from some of the other lawsuits and stuff and allegations that have come out prior to all of this as well. But was she in fear for her life in that exact moment? And I think that would have played a little bit better, in my opinion. Maybe they would have gotten that second-degree murder conviction, and I don't exactly know, but I don't think this was the appropriate angle to go, because even if you believe she's lying and she's not being truthful in this moment, what does that say for every other DV survivor out there? Any other person who is in this exact kind of relationship where maybe there isn't physical violence involved, but there is manipulation, there is control. There are all of these other power dynamics that are going on, that are happening, maybe financial ABUSE, right? That happens. All of this stuff happens all the time. Maybe, again, somebody who acts out their anger and frustration and takes it out as a way of control on their animals or on their children. Who knows? But what you are doing right now is you're putting DV in these black and white boxes where you're saying the only way that you can identify as a DV survivor is if somebody's coming at you with a knife or a GUN, or if somebody is physically punching you in the face or choking you out. And for me, it's so much more of a gray area, because it comes in all shapes, forms, and sizes. And as I'm really excited to dig into Mr. Ferris's testimony. He's the defense expert who speaks about the power wheel and all of that, and explaining how DV does not fit into just these specific boxes. And it just feels so archaic for me, and it's frustrating and disgusting. And again, regardless, put your feelings aside about how you feel about Ashley Benefield. And even though I personally believe her, I don't think a lot of these physical sensations that she's demonstrating on the stand with her body shaking, it just feels very real and authentic for me, being as somebody who's also been in a similar situation. Put your feelings aside and just listen to how she's minimizing the degree of all of this. And these are the exact conversations that go through DV survivors' minds. You start making up excuses for that partner, for that person who is hurting you. Saying, well, maybe they aren't that bad. Maybe I'm the problem. So yeah, it is victim shaming, it is victim blaming, and it is re-traumatizing them. And you're minimizing. And it's disgusting, regardless of how you feel about Ashley Benefield. And that's why I don't like this prosecution. I don't like their line of questioning, because I think they could have went about this and still got the conviction that they maybe wanted, maybe not murder too, but manslaughter for sure. They probably could have still convicted without all of that dirty line of questioning, in my opinion. So that being said, let's dive into the rest of this.
Correct.
Yes.
And you got married after 13 days.
Yes.
And you spoke with him about, or organized with him about, starting this ballet.
Yes.
Okay. And all of the money for the ballet came from him or investors, right?
My mom also funded part of the ballet.
You didn't put anything into it. Money.
Not from my account, no.
Now, because they want to paint her as a gold digger, but when she said, no, my mom also invested in this, which nobody had reported about. Now, I don't know if this is true or not, but I mean, they could easily call her out on it if they said, well, hey, we have, the receipts, and it looks like nobody invested in this other than Doug. I mean, that would be easy to prove, wouldn't not? Would it not? So by her testifying to this and saying, yeah, my mom also put in some of her money, who knows how much, but her mom is technically an investor. So no, it wasn't just Doug. And Ashley does a really good job with kind of combating a lot of these questions without deflecting or talking around it, and just saying, no, that's not what happened. And we already know Doug was broke. We already know his cousin testified to it. There's also other reports that came out too, that I think something about their bills not being paid on time, the house potentially going into foreclosure. So no. And I only wonder if some of that evidence wasn't allowed into this trial. Let's continue letting this play out.
Okay. In fact, during this time in South Carolina, you never worked, did you?
He wouldn't let me work.
Okay. When you said in the
She hops right off that. No, he didn't let me work. Hence why I didn't have money. And I'm curious to know if his former wife, Renee, who had passed away, which 9 months before they met and got together, got married, if she was allowed to work. Was she a stay-at-home mom? What did she do? What did the first wife do? Because remember, Ashley is his third wife. So I'm very curious to see. And we already know at one point she was working for Trump. She retired from ballet because she sustained some kind of injury. And I think developed fibromyalgia. So I don't know. Maybe she was also on disability too. I don't know how that works, but she said he didn't let me work. Okay, if that's true, well, that would make sense as to why you didn't pay for anything.
very beginning, he flew you to South Carolina to visit before you were married. He paid for that, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the cruise you talked about going on, he paid for that?
No,
He didn't.
he did not pay for the cruise. No.
Okay.
Yeah, he paid for my friend to go, but I had already paid for my mom and I to go. So
Okay. So he paid for your friend to go.
Which is easily provable. And you see how she's like, but he paid for your friend though, right? Right? Well, maybe that was him trying to establish some kind of control, because if she had already paid for this, then that's him kind of saying, well, hey, you want your friend? Like, I'm such a great guy. He's the new husband. He's love bombing her, right? He's trying to impress her, lavish her with all these things. I mean, that's the honeymoon phase, right? Of any new relationship. So not only are Doug and Ashley married, but they're also dating and they're in like that weird period of their relationship where now they're in this serious committed relationship, but at the same time they're still dating and getting to know each other. So I could totally see Doug being like, even if it was out of just goodwill and good intent, right? Giving him the benefit of the doubt, or her saying, oh, I wish I could have, my girlfriend with me, whatever. Oh, hey, I got you. Like, don't worry about it. Wow, really? You're going to pay for my friend? That's amazing. Wow. I don't know. Maybe he did it because he trusted the friend to keep an eye on her. I don't know. I'm just speculating here, but there could be a couple of different ways to look at it. And maybe it was just a nice thing that he was doing for her. But for me, it feels like, okay, well, she already had this covered. He can't pay for that. And I guess he couldn't go with her because whatever kind of work he did for a living. So, and he also had a child. He had Eva back at home who was only 15. So he can't just pick up and leave, right?
yes.
And he did not go with you.
Oh no. Mm-mm.
I want to ask you about the text messages that the defense talked to you about. It's going to be Defense Exhibit 3. I'm going to hand it to you. But I have the entirety of it on a spreadsheet that I'm going to put up, which is State's Exhibit 99. If we could dim the lights, please. And Judge, based on the rule of completeness, State would enter into evidence State's 99.
Did you want to be heard in addition to what we said earlier?
I haven't actually seen the specific message.
So the lawyers are going to show each other this.
89.
He's looking at the spreadsheet on the PowerPoint.
Mm-mm. Okay. So I would like to orient you to what we're looking at. So on the top line, it gives
Can we see?
whether the messages are outgoing or incoming. That would be the third, fourth column that we're looking at. And what I would like you to do is read the body of these as we go through. I'm going to expand it so you can see it. And if you could just read these for the jury.
Okay. So this is when I'm assuming they're on the cruise. Yeah, so this is 8/29/16. She's texting him via WhatsApp. WhatsApp is essentially like a internet. If you're not, you don't live outside the US, it's a kind of like a text messaging tool that's just free. You don't get charged any extra you don't get charged extra for texting internationally, so it's a free platform you can use to connect, and it would make sense she's on a cruise. I don't know what kind of cruise, but probably traveling through international waters. This is the best way to communicate with him, just in case you have no idea what WhatsApp is.
One part is just looking at Renee.
Who is that from you or from Doug?
It's from Doug to me.
So from Doug, one part is just looking at Renee. Okay, go ahead.
I'll tell that part to start. The day I met her, I felt her before I saw her. Oh. My ex-husband lived to argue. Renee and I maybe argued 5 times in 15 years, and even then ended up laughing. Smiley face. I'm a clown at heart and love people being happy. That seems like a hard act to follow. Baby. Like, always being armed. Yes, my love.
And the outgoing messages are you or Doug?
It looks like outgoing is Doug. Yeah, outgoing would be from Doug.
Judge, can we see the date for reference of the messages?
It's up on the screen.
They're like totally blocking his. I get it, like you're doing your line of but like you see, there's a lot of snarkiness to between the lawyer, and I like a little snarkiness between the lawyers. I do, because that for me goes to show like when somebody believes in their theory in the prosecution's case or in their client, like Mr. Taylor seems to do. But like, yeah, I like the way that you put together the spreadsheet. I mean, it is a lot of information. It's hard to kind of like see. I don't know what it looks like, how far he is. I mean, he's also an old man. Like, I think he said he's like in his 70s. It's a little hard to see. So, but yeah, I don't know if you caught that snarkiness. She's like, it's up on the screen. Like, okay, but like, give him a printout, bitch. Like, make it. You know, he's like 70 something. Like, God, like it's just unnecessary snark.
So yes, my love, I think was the last thing you said. And then what's the next thing?
He's trying to freaking read it.
Are you doing things that are dangerous?
And you're going to have to speak up just a little bit.
I'm sorry.
Here.
Are you doing things that are dangerous? To think of all the time that you were not with me and understanding them and how to conduct warfare in them for the kingdom.
Where was he when he was sending you these messages? While you were on the cruise?
I believe he would have been in Charleston.
Okay. He wasn't on a business trip.
I don't believe so.
Okay. Continue reading. All the other people.
Why does that matter?
All the other people. And then a rectangle. It makes me so sad. And then another rectangle. If I dwelt on it, I would go into rage to remove them from the earth.
This is all from
And your response to that?
Yes, baby, I hate it. It hurts. He said I could defend myself, and you were easy prey for predators. You're sweet and want to please people, and they used that.
And you said, I'm sorry. And then he said,
I desire to exterminate them and hold it a challenge. They are rats that should be removed.
and you said,
Oh, baby, my love.
So that is all from Doug, just to kind of go back a little bit. So the conversation shifts, and I wish that they would have asked Ashley to read this because, like, you know, court TV, the screen is cut. Obviously, the jury could see it. They get the printout. They can go through it in deliberations. But I mean, it's kind of hard to follow. It's like, okay, like what, like that 6:38 p.m. Okay, but like, who is this? This is the owner. Okay. Sometimes it feels a little unclear as to who's who. Whereas in the Karen Reed trial, excuse me, when they had Nick Carino reading through the Brian Higgins text, and not the Brian Higgins text, excuse me, I mean the John O'Keefe and Karen Reed text, it's just like how extremely uncomfortable it was. Like he would go through the date, the time, who said what, because it is difficult to follow. And you know, even if you are reading it along, some of it's a little smushed in, it's all highlighted in yellow. So But again, just to recap, so the conversation goes from like, hey, they're talking about like, oh, my ex-wife, which is like weird. He's talking about his not his ex-wife, but his late wife, and how like, oh, we had this great, amazing relationship, and we only fought, a few times the entire time we were here. So, which is like kind of also weird to talk about, like 2 year, almost like he's trying to push her in some kind of way, and she's like, oh, that seems like a hard act to follow. Like, okay, cool. And then it goes into this weird, which is why I wish we had the time. Like it would be easier to say, okay, when was this like an instant shift in the conversation? And then he's like, are you doing things that are dangerous? Like that's such a bizarre question. Like what does that mean? Like is she's on a cruise. Now, I have a thing about cruises. Don't get me wrong. Like with the rate of the number of people who go missing on a cruise, like absolutely, I will never go on a cruise. I will never go on a cruise. And CrimeCon is doing a cruise CrimeCon, which I think is so freaking ironic. But anyways, I mean, like, are you doing anything now? She's like probably drinking, like tanning, like having I don't know what time it is. It's probably early in the evening in August, depending on where she is. The sun's probably still out. I don't know, maybe she's hanging out by the pool, like, to think of all the time you were not with me. Like, this is heavy. This is only days, right, into them being together, correct? Or, like, a month or 2? It's really heavy. Not a lot of time. Yes, baby, I hate it. It hurts. I don't know. I guess this is from Ashley? What she's referring to. If I dwelt on it, this is from Doug. I would go into rage to remove them from the earth. Like that is just so bizarre. It almost feels like you just like smoked a lot of shrooms and like you're tripping out or something. Like what are you even talking about? And then does she say I could defend myself? You were easy prey for predators? Is she talking about him or is that from her? Is that from her or him? Like, I wish this was clearer. You're sweet and want to please people, and they used that. I guess this is from her? I desire to exterminate them, and holding back is a challenge. They are rats that should be removed. And then it seems like this is from Ashley.
Said, I'm sorry. And then he said,
I desire to exterminate them and hold it a challenge. They are rats that should be removed.
and you said,
Oh, baby, my love. Yes. Like that night, like last night, just the jerks
This
arguing
is Doug again.
near you about put me in a sheer murderous mood, but I was stuck and I couldn't defend you. I said, thank you, baby, but I was
Like, she's like, what? What the heck are you? This dude is unhinged. Like, and anybody who's like, Ashley's lying, she's faking it. Like, what are you saying she's faking it to? This is text messages from this guy. And he's literally speaking to her unhinged after they just get together, just get married. I think this is after they get married. And he's like, yeah, I'm in a murderous mood. I feel like I couldn't defend you. And like, again, this is why I said in my last video, I don't know, like, I'm not going to diagnose, but could it be possible he was suffering potentially from some kind of form of PTSD or a different mental illness? Serious question, because some of these questions that he's asking her just feel very unhinged, and like there's something in his brain that just chemically is not right. Like, how do you go from just talking about like, hey, yeah, like we never really fought, me and my late wife, and having like seemingly a somewhat normal conversation, to are you doing dangerous things? Like, what in his brain snapped to even ask that question? She's on a cruise. I mean, more like if I was texting my wife, I'd be like, hey, you having fun? Like, what are you doing? Are you staying out of trouble? Like, that's a more feel like a more appropriate kind of conversation flow instead of being like, I'm going to exterminate these random people who I don't even know, who may or may not have been around you. Just the mere thought of you being near men, that is control. That is somebody who is extremely insecure of themselves, who's totally unhinged and has violent tendencies. Like, I don't understand why people can't wrap their head around it and want to protect a man like this who there's documented evidence of him being an abuser. There's documented evidence, so I don't understand. And being intimidating. Like, how is this not I don't understand. Now, again, if you're in the camp of I believe two things can be true, yeah, he was a human shit stain, or maybe he had some fucked up problems beforehand, but in that particular moment, I don't really see anything that would lead me to believe Ashley's life was in danger in that specific moment. That's fine, that's fair. I can talk about that all day long. But for you to not acknowledge that this man was sick in his brain is just absolutely wild to me. And I want to understand. I want to understand. What about this conversation does not sound unhinged? This sounds completely unhinged. And it makes me sad because it's like maybe this was the thing. Nobody was seeing the signs and saying, "Hey, there's something wrong with this dude and we need to get him help." And I'm not just talking anger issues. I'm talking about like there might be something chemically wrong in his brain where we need to help him. Maybe that would make a difference. I don't know. Maybe he'd still be alive today. I don't know. But this seems like a complete red flag to me.
Okay, he said. What could have been a fight, etc. Only you being with me will over time remove images in my head. It is same. And knowing you were taken advantage
He's saying, and knowing you were taking advantage of, still in my mind, like, how is she taken advantage of? And like, again, speculation here. I don't know what Ashley has been through prior to her relationship with Doug. Maybe there's other trauma she's experienced in her life with maybe former relationships, maybe even I don't know. I don't know. I'm speculating. But why would he say something like that? And it just seems like he's directly talking about it, and see how she's like, "Thank you, baby. I was okay though." Like, like, what the fuck? But it could have been a fight. How? Only you being with me will over time removes the images in my head. Like, that's terrible. He's seeing things. He's seeing things that's a red flag. That's somebody who needs help.
about put me in a sheer murderous mood, but I was stuck and I couldn't defend you. I said, thank you, baby, but I was okay. He said, what could have been a fight, etc. Only you being with me will over time remove images in my head. It is same. And knowing you were taken advantage of in my mind makes me explode with anger to take them out. God made you for me. And I said, yes, baby. He said to enjoy the beauty he did craft on earth.
And now he's
I see Renee as
pulling
Eva's
in
mom,
religion
not my
again.
wife. It is strange, but
Let me pull that back up.
he said it is strange, but there is no emotional connection. I said, well, I'm glad. I just wish I could see it that way.
And you said, I'm glad I wish I could see it that way. Were you talking about being jealous of his relationship with Renee?
I guess you could put it that way.
You can,
I mean, that's fair. That's fair. He keeps talking about his late wife, and like, I'm not saying that that's a wrong thing. Like, he didn't give himself enough time in between like, I don't know. Maybe he wasn't ready to be in another relationship. I think there were a lot of things. He probably shouldn't have been in a relationship, period. He probably should have gotten some kind of mental counseling, in my opinion. there's a lot. There's a lot to unpack there. But yeah, when he's constantly, saying Renee, and like we see pictures of Renee, she was beautiful, totally opposite of Ashley too. Blonde, a little bit curvy in my opinion, curvier, gorgeous, looked like a freaking supermodel. Ashley equally is beautiful, just different, totally different. Very thin, tall. I don't know how tall Renee was. So yeah, I could totally. And he was married to her for 15 years, has a child with her, or had a child with her. So I could totally understand Ashley being like, yeah, I'm kind of insecure. like, and now I kind of gotta be like stepmommy to your daughter who completely resents me. It was a constant reminder of your late wife. Yeah, I could totally understand her, and jealousy, fine. I think those are all fair emotions to have in a situation like that.
Continue to read.
Um, I know we both have a battle to fight in our minds. He was sitting on the mantle in the background. I'm crazy, I know. But it just killed my head.
We got to go back to that. Well, I'm glad. So this is Ashley, or just going back. Okay, so it's strange, but there is no emotional connection. I mean, you just said how great your relationship with your late wife was. You only fought 5 times throughout your 15 years of marriage. It's fine. If that is true, that's fine. I don't believe it based on those text message threads between yourself and Renee, but all right. We'll take that. And well, I'm glad. I just wish I could see it that way, Ashley. But no emotional connection. I don't know. Maybe he was already over the relationship. Who knows? Who knows? I wasn't there. I don't know. Then he says, I know we both have a battle to fight in our minds. Like I feel like the conversations he's having is not even like with Ashley. Like it's very, what's the word? Like he's very, I don't want to say disengaged, but like his brain is not in the same place as Ashley and Doug texting. Like his brain and his mind is in a completely, like he's watching his body and his self like going through this texting thread. Because none of this makes any sense, and this is why I think it is important to see the date, the timestamps, because it's this all like flowing like one after the other, because this doesn't make any sense. This is a person who's clearly unhinged. Like 1 minute they're talking about Renee, and now he's like, I know we both have a battle to fight in our minds. She doesn't have to fight any battle. She's just saying, I'm glad that you love me and that you see me as your wife, and I'm glad. I just don't feel that way yet. I feel like I still there's this shadow cast around me, and I have to continue proving myself. So that's relevant, but then I know we both have a battle to fight in our minds. Like, what battle are you fighting? He was sitting on the mantle in the background? Is that from Ashley? I'm so confused. Or is that from him?
We both have a battle to fight in our minds. He was sitting on the mantle in the background. I'm crazy, I know.
Like, I think this is Doug. I'm crazy, I know. If this is Doug, I mean, yeah, that's like what? Like that goes to the point of you are seeing stuff. Who was sitting on the mantle in the background? But it just killed my head.
But it just killed my head. Heart. I know I see you in my mind with a bad person with your legs spread and a shitty person choking you out. That haunts me.
I'm so confused. Like, who is who?
Battle. He was sitting on the mantle in the background.
I guess this
I'm
is
crazy, I know.
Ashley.
But it just killed my head.
He was sitting on the mantle. I guess she's talking about a different experience. I'm crazy, I know, but it just killed my head. I'm so confused. Like, is she referring to, because I guess the bold is Ashley. So what is she referring to the two guys on the cruise? Is she talking about her past relationships? Is she talking about a different traumatic experience? I don't know.
But it just killed my heart. I know I see you in my mind with a bad person with your legs spread and a shitty person choking you out. That haunts me. I love you and I never want you. I'm sorry. Rectangle. Now all I see is some douchebag on top of you, fucking you with your legs, choking you out and fucking you more. Right now, I literally want to kill him or them. I said, baby, don't even think like that. He said, you haven't seen the warrior side and you never want to.
All I can think of, and I'll get this on full screen. So the bolded, so confusing. The bolded print, that was Ashley speaking about the man on the mantle. So I guess she's seeing, and maybe she's reliving some kind of trauma. Maybe the guys that were around her on the cruise, maybe it triggered something in her. That's the only thing I can kind of piece together. I don't know what you guys think, but I mean, that would make sense, I guess, with this line of, conversation. Because then he's saying, now I'm just seeing this D-bag hurting you and doing these things. And she's like, don't even think like that. No one's going to touch me. So that's all I can think of, is maybe she shared a previous experience with another person, another relationship, another partner who, because that can happen too. There can be SA in relationships. Just because you're with somebody doesn't mean that they can't grape you. They can still very much do that. So I don't know if that's what she's referring to. Again, if you're in the camp of she's lying, maybe if she was, and she's getting them all fired up, I just don't see the point of why she would do that. But
I said, no one will ever touch me. I am yours. You are right. I want to see you only as my sweet and loving husband who is gentle to me and kind.
and
He said,
she chokes up on that part. I don't want to see you as this warrior person. I just want you to be kind and loving and sweet, who's gentle to me. So that kind of indicates to me that maybe there was additional DBUSE. I don't know. But I do know that if you are somebody who has been through experiences like that, that's something that those types of people will smell from a mile away. And you're instantly in a more vulnerable position. And just because it happened to you once doesn't mean that you learned better or you know the warning signs. If anything, you start to trust people even more because you're just looking for help, and you start to believe, well, it was just one bad egg. It was just this one bad experience. So I could see that. I don't know. Has there been other allegations that have come out from our other relationship, whether proven or false? I would be so curious to
husband
know.
who is gentle to me and kind. He said, we went from joy and passion to now I'm in a testosterone rage inside. And who is always there and safe. That's what I said. And I said, let's not ruin the day. He said, but kill the bad people. Okay. And I said, tell me that you love me.
So this conversation was about things that you had told him that people had done to you, correct? When he's talking about, I'm imagining this, I'm imagining people choke you, he's talking about a conversation that you had with him explaining that this had happened.
I think he was referring to on the cruise one night. I was talking to him on the phone,
Okay.
and I was sitting out in the hallway up at the top deck, and I was just trying to get somewhere where it'd be quiet so I could talk to him. And it was near, there was some like a bar or something up there, I think. I'm not sure, but people were coming in and out, like maybe a restaurant. And while we were
Okay, I'm gonna
talking,
stop you
he
there.
heard.
Is the answer yes or no? Did
Just say,
She needs to allow her to finish her answer, Your Honor.
you finish your answer.
He had heard a couple guys that were talking loudly, and he got upset because he thought these guys were going to hurt me. And so he had talked about then that he imagined that, you know, I was out in the world without him and that people were going to take advantage of me and that it was going to happen to me.
and he was afraid for your safety.
Yeah.
And he was saying that if anybody hurts you or he thinks about anybody hurting you, it sends him into a rage.
Yes.
And that scared you.
I'm sorry.
And that scared you.
Well, as I said earlier, at the time, I kind of, you know, played it off in my head that he was just my new husband who was trying to be protective and like show that he loved me by kind of being, you know, manly.
Like, you hear how condescending that is? Like, yeah, I would be a little weirded out by that because that's really intense. So, okay, so the prosecution kind of asked what I was thinking too, because I was always confused about that is, and I don't know, maybe Ashley thought that's what he was referring to, and he was referring to something else. Maybe she doesn't want to talk about this other trauma that happened to her, if it did happen. I don't know, I'm speculating. But it did, the way that the prosecution asked, that was kind of what I was also picking up is this coming from a different conversation? It's so hard to tell because we can't see, at least us, the jury could, we can't, what the timestamps are because of the frickin' court TV and how it's cut off in the frame. But and it's hard to tell who's talking and what. So we're gonna do our best to forge ahead, but it's just so condescending, like, and that made you afraid? Yeah, because he's threatening to kill these people. Like, he's not even saying like, oh, we're like, you having a good time, like, oh, you know, like, all right, well, like, if you do feel like unsafe, like, you know, just stay on the phone, like, normal. I don't know. That would appear to me a little bit more normal, caring, being kind and gentle and protective. This is like overly aggressive where you're imagining and now you're in this testosterone filled rage about what? About what? Like, she's almost blaming Ashley for making him angry, which is just, again, completely problematic and disgusting and totally victim blaming and shaming. And regardless whether or not you believe Ashley, replace Ashley with somebody else, with another DV survivor. And imagine them getting asked these same exact questions, like they're being interrogated. And granted, yeah, she put herself on the stand. Sure, she opens herself up for the opportunity to be cross-examined. Of course she does. Of course she's going to get pushed back. But I mean, like, this is absolutely appalling to me.
So I want to talk about you having a baby. So Doug had a vasectomy removal in April of 2017, right?
Yes.
And you paid for that.
Part of it went on my debit card or my credit card.
And your intention was to get pregnant.
Yes, we had talked about that. Yeah.
And this was how many months after you were married?
We got married in September, so October, November, December, January, February, March, April. 7.
And was this during this time? You said he had started criticizing you, right?
Mm-hmm.
About the way you looked, your clothes, the way you acted. He was, according to you, he tried to flip a table, threw a chair, right?
Yes.
He would scream at you.
Yes.
He would call you slut and whore.
Yes.
And you want a baby.
I mean, yeah, we were married. We wanted a family.
So the vasectomy reversal happens, and I believe
in her brain, yeah, as the prosecutor's asking her these questions, she's probably, because they are legitimate questions, it's like, well, and you still wanted a baby? And she's probably like in her brain, like saying, yeah, like, I just wanted to be a mom. Like, she's trying to, you can tell, like, the wheels are in her brain are spinning, and she's trying she's starting to realize, like, yeah, I probably shouldn't have with this man, but I wanted a baby. I wanted a baby, and maybe she thought it would fix things. Is that so unbelievable? After living with his beloved daughter Eva and seeing how great of a father allegedly he was to Eva, maybe she thought, oh yeah, if I'm carrying your child, you can't hurt me. If I get pregnant, you can't hurt me. And maybe when they did decide to have a child, maybe it was one of the good times, because these things happen in cycles. So I don't think it's so far out of reach for her to. Again, it's just so asinine. Like, how many DV survivors get pregnant by their abuser? Like, it happens. It happens. And I get the line of questioning, because I get where they're going with it, but playing devil's advocate, yeah. Like, you can tell she's like, yeah, like, I thought it would make things better. I wanted a kid. I still loved him. You can still love the person who's hurting you. People don't understand that. That's why it's so important for us to break down this. Regardless of how you feel about Ashley, but the way that the prosecution is trying to put DV in these boxes of what it is and what it can be and what constitutes DV. It's important because maybe some of our language, some of our verbiage, some of the way that the law works needs to change, because it's not so black and white.
You said that this baby was a surprise. Is that what you said?
Well, we weren't like planning on it right then. Yeah.
Were you having unprotected sex?
I suppose so.
Okay. So you knew that unprotected sex would result potentially in a pregnancy.
The doctor had told us that it probably wouldn't work for a while, so it wasn't something that we thought would happen that fast.
Okay. But it did.
Yes.
How quickly? When did you get pregnant?
I guess July.
And right around this time is when you say the incident happened where Doug threw a gun at a wall.
He threw it at me.
Shot a gun at the ceiling. I think you made several allegations, correct?
Yeah, he admitted to it, but yes.
I need to go back to that where she's like, "Did you have unprotected sex?" Like, and see how she says it to you. Did you have unprotected sex? Like, it's just so like she's being slut shamed again. Like, maybe she didn't want to have unprotected sex, or maybe she, again, if she did want to get pregnant, yeah, okay, that would lighten the chances of her getting pregnant. And if she's trying to get pregnant because she's afraid maybe he'll be nicer to me and he won't hurt me if I'm carrying his child. But also, too, they're married. How many married couples use condoms? Maybe not every time they had sex, it was consensual. Not that there's been any allegations of that, but I'm just speculating. All of these things are possible.
I mean, yeah, we were. Yes.
He would scoop out the way you looked, your clothes, the way you acted. He was, according to you, he tried to flip a table, threw a chair, right?
Yes.
He would scream at you.
Yes.
He would call you slut and whore.
Yes.
And you want a baby.
I mean, yeah, we were married. We wanted a family.
Okay. So the vasectomy reversal happens, and I believe you said that this baby was a surprise. Is that what you said?
Well, we weren't like planning on it right then. Yeah.
Were you having unprotected sex?
I suppose so.
Okay. So you knew that unprotected sex would result potentially in a pregnancy.
The doctor had told us that it probably wouldn't work for a while, so it wasn't something that we thought would happen that fast.
Okay. But it did.
Yes.
How quickly? When did you get pregnant?
I guess July.
And right around this time is when you say the incident happened where Doug threw a gun at a wall.
He threw it at me.
Shot a gun at the ceiling. I think
Nope,
you
he
made
threw it
several
at her.
allegations, correct?
Yeah, he admitted to it, but yes.
What were you arguing about?
I think Eva was part of it. I don't specifically remember.
And wasn't it true that you had a problem with Eva and you thought she was disrespecting you at that time?
I wouldn't say I had a problem with Eva. There was a lot of tension in the house, but yeah, there's a lot of things going on that
Okay.
were not ideal.
You knew she was 15.
Yeah.
And you knew she had just lost her mother tragically to death.
Yeah.
And you were how much older than her?
10 years, 9 years, 10 years.
And this tension surprised you.
No, I mean, at first he had told me that she was really going to love me and that she was ready to have a woman in her life and that he wanted me to move in quickly because she needed a mom. So he made it sound like
A
she
lot of
also
pressure.
felt that way.
And you had no feelings of your own.
Oh, I was excited to get to be her stepmom.
And you gave her
Yeah, because he's gassing her up and he's saying, like, yeah, my daughter's great. She's going to love you. Like, you guys are going to get along. It's going to be amazing. Not even taking into account, like, why isn't that, like, more of a red flag? The fact that he didn't even invite his own daughter to his wedding, didn't tell her he was married until well after the fact, and moves in this random. Yeah, I'd be like, what the heck, Dad? Who the heck is this? And being a teenager and being snarky, you're like, yeah, of course, of course. How many times have we seen these scenarios play out? Where the older guy marries a younger girl, moves her in. Now the kids are supposed to call her stepmommy. How many times have we seen that work out where the kid is like happy, ecstatic about that, especially when their mom died 9 months prior, that they haven't even processed yet because one, they're still maturing. They're not adults yet. And even if they are adults, grief is handled in many different ways. But especially for children, because Eva was a child, having to process all of that. And then dad moves in this woman who looks like she could be her sister. I mean, yeah, that would alarm most people and be something that takes a little getting used to. And it seems like Eva was closer to her dad than her mom. Now, I've said this before. I don't know if it was purposely done that way, where Doug was trying to isolate Eva maybe from her mother, so he would be the favorable parent to better hide what was really going on behind closed doors. I don't know. Speculating, but I mean, again, they're like going after her like you're just a slut. Like they're totally slut shaming her. You're a whore. Can't believe you would do this to this teen. She didn't know. Like she meets this guy. Who knows when she even found out that he had a daughter? Because nobody else seemed to have known who the heck Ashley was. So I could very much believe him being like, oh, by the way, can't wait for you to move in because I got my daughter and she's going to love you, and just slipping that into conversation. It's a lot. It's a lot. He's your new husband. Ashley's very vulnerable. She's 24. There is a power dynamic. It's undeniable.
shadow box right around this time, correct?
For Christmas, it would have been in December.
All right. And what was the shadow box?
You want me to describe it?
Yes.
It was like a small picture. It had like deep sides and like the glasses at the front of it. And there was a sand dollar that I had painted and decorated. And I put it on like a black cardstock. And I wrote
Eva just walks
a saying
out.
on it that said something about how like you can be strong through the storms, and that, you know, seashells are beautiful things that come out of storms.
And that shadow box is the reason you were arguing that day with Doug, correct?
I know it came up at one point. I don't know that was the reason.
And what was the problem with the shadow box?
Eva had taken it apart and I guess had thrown out the thing that I made and was using the picture frame for something else.
What was she using the picture frame for?
She had put a rose from her mom's funeral in it.
And that upset you pretty badly, didn't it?
It made me really sad. I'd taken a lot of time to make it for her, and I thought it was special. And yeah.
You began crying,
yes,
and you dropped to the floor and sobbed hysterically.
probably.
You were so upset that she put her dead mother's rose in the shadow box.
It wasn't that. It was that she took it apart. I mean, I would have bought her another shadow box.
You went to Doug.
Yeah, I can understand that. I can understand being upset and being like, wow, like what the heck? She was probably overcome with emotions. Like I'm stuck living with this guy and his daughter absolutely hates me. I don't know what to do. I don't know where I fit in. I'm nowhere near. I mean, she wasn't from South Carolina, correct? who knows where her friends and family were? Her mom seemingly in Florida, right? And at no point do we hear anything about Ashley's friends. We hear about Doug's friends, about his friend Tripp, who married them, and his bestie, creepy cousin Tommy. But we don't hear anything about Ashley's friends. Isolation tactic. So she might have felt very isolated in that moment and overwhelmed with different emotions and thinking, wow, my stepdaughter hates me. And I don't think I think it's totally reasonable. I don't think she was mad about even using that to put her mother's thing. And like, yeah, you could also look at it as like Eva being, spiteful towards it, because again, she's right in having all these emotions as well too. I mean, like, who the heck are you? Like, no, I don't want your stupid box. I want my mom back. I mean, she was a teenager. It's like that's how teenagers behave. And Ashley herself is only a few years from being a teenager. I mean, she was 24, correct? She's still emotionally developing. She's still emotionally maturing herself. So I can understand there being tension between them and them both probably not liking each other. I can understand that. 100%. I don't think that's a red flag or bad.
And said it was disrespectful that she took this apart.
According to Doug?
No, according to you. You went to Doug and said, she's acting disrespectfully. You need to handle her. She upset me. I'm crying.
I don't remember saying that about that.
Isn't it, in fact, what you were arguing about before this whole incident with the gun in the ceiling?
Is this relevant as it relates to the daughter?
Can you approach, please?
Yeah, like she's trying to base this entire
Actually,
argument
at one point,
based off of the fact that Eva was upset, she upset her, and Ashley was mad. Because again, they're trying to paint her as the evil stepmother. So she's a gold digger and she's an evil stepmother. Okay. And she's a whore.
so the day that this argument happened, you actually, at one point, were in the car with Doug, right?
Yes,
Okay, you're going to the bank and going to do some other errands.
I believe so.
And the entire time, you're upset about this shadow box.
I don't distinctly. The argument kind of came from there, I guess.
And in fact, it wasn't an argument, right? It was you being upset.
He said that like life was out of control and he couldn't deal with the people at home and he couldn't deal with the people at the ballet. And he felt like everything was just too stressful and he was upset with everybody.
And didn't he ask you to stop?
I'm sure at some point.
And you didn't stop
I guess not.
for the car ride? No? Yes or no?
I don't remember.
And you kept telling him you need to discipline Eva.
I don't remember saying that.
And he said, let's just stop talking about this for a while. I need to think.
He was yelling at me.
So he's yelling at you, but you weren't sitting there like you are now, were you? You weren't sitting there like this.
I guess I was buckled into the car, so I probably would have been sitting further back.
And you didn't stop. And you get home, you're still arguing, correct?
He was still yelling at me, yes.
And you're not yelling at all. And the fact that he had a gun with him when you continued to argue in the house was because he grabbed the gun from inside the car to bring his items from the car into the house, correct?
I'm not sure why he had it, I guess.
Okay. And it was in a holster.
I believe so.
And you both used to carry guns.
Mhm.
You carried guns on a regular basis.
Yes,
you
ma'am.
have had at the time more than one gun.
Yes, ma'am.
And you actually bragged, as well as Doug, about having guns, correct?
Yes.
And you would go shoot them on a regular basis.
I haven't been to the range since before the presidential election.
Okay. But during the time that you met Doug at a political event, you had one of the guns in your bra.
Yes, that's where I concealed carried.
Okay. So having a firearm in a car or in the house is not that unusual to you.
No, ma'am.
So after
I mean,
inside, there's
probably
this
not unusual to the jury either. You're in Florida, so
argument that continues on and on and on and on.
Ashley's from Texas too. So I think she said she was born in Corpus Christi and then she moved, I think grew up in Maryland, but she still got that Texas blood in her. Doug is from South Carolina. I don't know if that's where he was initially born. So yeah, I mean, I think everybody has firearms. I mean, I live in Tennessee now, so it's like everybody does. Okay.
And you're still asking Doug to discipline Eva.
I don't recall that.
And you say he was waving a gun around and threw a gun at them.
Yes, ma'am.
So he has a gun in his hand, could point it at you,
He did point
but
it
he
at me.
throws a gun at the wall.
No, he threw it at me. He missed me.
Okay. And it hit the wall.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. When was this? What was the date of this argument?
At the end of June.
2017.
Yes, ma'am.
When was your wedding reception?
It was shortly after that, maybe like a week or two later. I don't remember specifically.
Okay. So even though you've been married before, you were now having a wedding reception.
Yes, when we got married, it was just the two of us.
And at this wedding reception, you had a lot of guests come
I'd say maybe a dozen. Like my friends and family came.
and they're dressed up.
Yes.
You're in your wedding dress.
Yes.
And I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 10. I want you to tell me what this is. Or I'm sorry, it's 100. I want you to tell me what this is. It's going to come up behind you. What is this a picture of?
That's a picture of Kevin, Christy, me, and then Doug.
And is that a picture from the wedding reception that we just talked about?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 101. What is that?
That's a picture of me and my friend Christy.
And is that at the same wedding reception?
Yes.
And State's Exhibit 102. What is that?
It's a picture of my friend Laura and me, and then my friend Christy.
And this is also at the same reception?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. State will move into evidence States 100 through 102.
Any objection?
I'm sorry, I missed it.
Any objection to states 100, 101, 102?
No.
Received.
Thank you. And in States 100, are you scared here of Doug?
No, I would not say.
You said on direct examination that around this time you were living the nightmare. Those were your words, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Were you living the nightmare here?
Oh, no, not at that moment. No, that was a very nice day.
It was a very nice day because guess what, lady? This shit happens in cycles. And I know now my Long Island's coming out and I can't help but curse. And I apologize if you're offended by it, but it's so frustrating to me because it's not only, again, if you believe everything that Ashley is saying is truthful, which I personally do, that's my opinion. But still, I mean, this is highly offensive to any DV survivor. And saying that you always have to constantly be living the nightmare in order for it to be justifiable. No, that like I don't know this prosecutor. I don't know. I'm assuming, and from the way that she's asking these questions, and I get why she's asking these questions, because she's chosen to prove her case in the way that she's proving her case. Fine. But it's just so highly offensive that you constantly have to be this battered shelter of a woman who's weak and trembling constantly and covered in bruises, and this because that's what TV tells us. That's what ABUSC looks like. It's disgusting. It's absolutely deplorable, and this is why we need to have conversations about it, because it's not black and white. It's not. You can have good days and bad days, and at this point, she's newly married. Maybe it seemed like there were more good days in the beginning, and then Doug got comfortable and started to show his true colors and got her moved into the house. Of course he's going to be nice in front of everybody. The cameras are on, everybody's dressed up. He paid for this event with who knows whose money. And she looks gorgeous. Maybe she thinks, okay, well now, like, this is a good day. This is a good day. Maybe he's different. This is the man I fell in love with. It's very difficult to explain those emotions. And that's why it takes survivors so many times before they actually leave for the final time. That is why. It's not all black and white. He's not always in this blinding rage.
How about at this moment?
Oh, it was a good day.
And States 102 at this moment.
Same. It was a good day.
So you get pregnant and you decide to move in with your mother. So when do you decide to move in with your mother in Florida?
It was the end of August, I believe. I was really sick, and he brought me down to my mom's house and dropped me off.
Okay, but going to your mom's house was your choice, right?
We decided together. He said he couldn't take care of me. He was too busy, and that my mom could take care of me better. So I was happy to go.
You needed someone to take care of you while you were pregnant.
I was really sick. Yes.
So you moved down
You
with your
needed
mother
some-
maybe
I
August
mean-
of 2007.
You needed someone to take care of you while you were pregnant. It's like, ma'am, do you not have I don't know. Maybe she doesn't have children. I don't have children, but my sister had not a difficult pregnancy, but it wasn't the most comfortable pregnancy. Her sister-in-law had an extremely difficult pregnancy to the point where she almost died from it. So yeah, women can have difficult pregnancies. And Ashley, again, she is 24. Her father is not in the picture. It seems like Doug doesn't want to deal with any of this. Ashley also has fibromyalgia, so that's probably making it even more painful. And not to mention all the hormones of being pregnant. I can only imagine the pain that she was in. And yeah, maybe she reduced herself down to that point where she got into that little girl mindset of, I want my mom. And I get it. I get that so much. And I went like a year without speaking to my parents. During that time, I had some of the most difficult parts of my life where I would just break down and cry. And even having my wife there just sometimes wasn't enough. Because you go back to being that little girl who just wants her mom, who just wants her dad, no matter what is going on. And I could never bring myself to go to them because we need that space to grow. So I can understand. Again, Ashley may be being afraid. All of this stuff happening. Who knows what Doug was like around her? Maybe she's like, I'm just so tired of this house. I can't take it. I cannot go through this pregnancy. He's absent-minded. Like, he's too busy to help me. Like, what? So yeah, and that's consistent with what her mom said. Now, granted, again, you can look at that and be like, well, she's lying. Her mom's biased. That's fine and fair. But there's no evidence to support that isn't true. Because the only evidence that could potentially contradict that would be testimony from Doug himself, and he's no longer with us. He's no longer alive. So there's no way to prove or disprove that it happened. So all we can do is, again, take this at face value and say, okay, I mean, it's consistent with what her mom said.
17, you said?
The end of August, I believe.
Okay. But there's still this issue of the injunction in South Carolina while this is going on, this South Carolina, Florida thing, correct?
I'm not sure I understand the
Well,
question.
you said you applied for the South Carolina injunction, or you received the South Carolina injunction right around that time in 2017. Actually, I think you said November 2017.
Yes, a few months later.
So shortly
November.
after you moved in with your mother, a couple of months, you filed for an injunction in South Carolina.
Yes, ma'am.
And we talked about the fact that, or you talked with the defense about the fact that it was a mutual injunction.
Yes, ma'am.
So both parties agreed to stay away from each other, correct?
Yeah, I believe that it was for both parties to stay away.
No evidence was presented at this hearing.
I don't believe so.
None of your complaints were heard at this hearing.
There was like a written, like a filing.
But the judge, other than that, did not hear any evidence at the hearing.
That's correct.
All of that was forestalled because the two of you agreed, okay, fine, we will have this voluntary stay away order.
It was decided through the attorneys, but I believe that was, yes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So the judge never found that Doug Benefield was dangerous and ordered this injunction.
I'm not sure what the judge found. I don't know what you mean by that.
There was never a court finding.
There was never a court finding, and I'm so glad that like we're going through this again, because that was always confusing. Because Stephanie Murphy also used that during her testimony. It was completely unfounded. All of these complaints and allegations, but they weren't founded or unfounded because there was no evidence that was ever entered in. So like No, a judge is not going to be able to determine whether or not these allegations of Doug's violent behavior being true or false because there was no evidence entered in. So you just, again, totally contradicted yourself, which is why, again, the more and more we go through not only her testimony, but some of the other previous testimony from both the state's case and the defense's case, I think goes to show that the jury did believe there was some history of DV, which is why they didn't convict on second-degree murder. And I personally think that that was a partial win for the defense, because if she got second-degree murder, yeah, she could be facing what, up to life or at minimum 25 years, I think. Whereas manslaughter has a maximum of 30 years. I don't know what the minimum is. I'll go look that up as this continues to play. But yeah, like playing that back, there was no evidence that could have been founded or unfounded. So again, you're just opening up the door for the realm of possibility.
So both parties agreed to stay away from each other, correct?
Yeah, I believe that it was for both parties to stay away.
No evidence was presented at this hearing.
I don't believe so.
None of your complaints were heard at this hearing.
There was like a written, like a filing.
But the judge, other than that, did not hear any evidence at the hearing.
That's correct.
All of that was forestalled because the two of you agreed, okay, fine, we will have this voluntary stay away order.
It was decided through the attorneys, but I believe that was, yes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So the judge never found that Doug Benefield was dangerous and ordered this injunction.
I'm not sure what the judge found. I don't know what you mean by that.
There was never a court finding giving you an injunction other than you stipulated to it.
The judge ordered it. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
yeah, like there was no evidence to find or not find. So all of these things that she was alleging could have very well have been true, but because they both volunteered that we're just going to stay away from each other voluntarily, that okay. There's nothing to do here except just grant the order. That's it. You're both agreeing to this thing. Cool. Case done. Awesome. We don't have to go through all this knockout, drag out litigation like Stephanie Murphy likes to say. But I know we're still in South Carolina here. But so the minimum manslaughter sentence, if there are no grounds for a downward departure sentence. So this is with a firearm, which is what Ashley has been convicted of, manslaughter with a firearm, 11.5 years. So which would mean she'd be around 42, 43 years old, because I think she's 32 now, which is so wild to me because my sister is like that age. And also has a daughter, so it's like weird. I don't think she's gonna get sentenced to the full 30. And I don't think she might even get sentenced to the minimum, but regardless, I don't think she's gonna do probably 10 years. She's probably gonna get parole in a few years and then be out. That's my personal opinion, and just based on the judge's previous rulings. But what say you? Let me know what you think in the comment section below.
And this injunction, actually, part of it says that neither party shall harass or threaten or do those types of things to each other.
Yes,
right?
ma'am.
Okay. So then after you're in Florida, you get a package that you say was in violation of this injunction. And it's a birthday present, right?
Yes,
It's a tea set.
among other things. Yes, ma'am.
And you liked tea.
I like drinking tea. Yes, ma'am.
You drank tea all the time with Doug.
Yes.
Okay. And you opened this tea and you claim that it smelled so strongly that you automatically rushed it to the sheriff's office.
I didn't specifically sniff the tea. It was when I opened the box. The whole contents had a very strong chemical smell.
So you immediately rushed it over to the sheriff's office.
No, ma'am. I immediately sealed it up and I left it in my garage.
For how long?
I don't remember specifically. It was like maybe a day or two. I don't remember.
It was a little bit longer than a day or two, was it not?
I don't remember.
Why does that even matter?
So after this time goes by, you take it to the sheriff's office and you claim that this was a violation of injunction. Right.
It was. Yes, ma'am.
And you also claim that this was all part of Doug's poisoning scheme to poison you and your unborn child.
Hazmat informed me that there was toxic
I don't want to hear
chemicals
what someone else told you.
Hazmat informed me, because remember, they won't let any of that in because they don't want that in. They don't want to show that, yeah, she did, because she's still pregnant at this point, which again, why is it so wild for people to believe that even if there wasn't necessarily poison in that tea set or not, there could have been a strong scent that if she's pregnant, she could have been sensitive to the smell. So I don't think that that's completely ridiculous that she would be like, oh my God, this is like a really strong smell. Who knows what kind of tea he got for her? It could have been like some weird, earthy, natural, grainy stuff that just omits a really strong odor. So I don't think that is like that bizarre. She's pregnant. Like, yeah, she's going to be sensitive. Certain smells are going to throw her off her game. But nevertheless, and I'm glad she kind of snuck that in there, Hazmat said, and she's like, well, I don't care what Hazmat has to say. Well, I care. I'm curious to know what was in that report. Would that have been helpful if we could have gotten that into evidence? If those allegations were in fact true? And I'm so deeply fascinated. I would love to know the cause of death for his second wife rather, Renee. I would love to know. I would love to know if there was a toxicology report. Was she buried? Do we know if she was buried or cremated? That would also be hugely telling to me. I don't know if anybody knows that, but let me know if y'all do.
I want to hear what you claimed, that this was part of his poisoning of you, plan to poison you.
Well, based off of what I was told, that was the conclusion I came to.
Ma'am? Yes or no? What, according to the way you felt, this gift was a part of his plan to poison you.
It concerned me. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
So no charges were filed for that, correct?
Correct.
So you filed for an injunction based on the same allegations, right?
When my injunction in South Carolina was getting ready to expire, yes, I filed for one in Florida.
Okay. So
Because
when
you
you filed in
violated
Florida,
it.
about what time was this? What date?
I could give you a ballpark. It was in the spring. I don't remember exactly
Spring of 2018?
when. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So you had left Doug in South Carolina August of 2017,
Yes, ma'am.
and you filed for an injunction in the spring of 2018,
That sounds right.
but you hadn't been living with him, correct?
Correct.
You hadn't even had any contact with him for a very long time. When you
Yeah,
filed
but
for
he was
that
trying to
injunction.
contact her.
Other than him sending the box and
So what violence were you trying to prohibit by filing this injunction? Everything that happened in South Carolina.
well, I was just hoping that wouldn't happen again.
Okay. And at the same time you did this motion for an injunction, you also did a motion to terminate Doug's parental rights, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So during this time that you haven't been with him in almost a year, at least half a year, there hasn't been any violence other than you say the T said. You're filing for an injunction all at the same time that you're trying to terminate his parental rights. This is all correct, right?
Sounds correct. I
And
believe.
you hadn't even had the baby yet,
As of when?
as of the time that you were trying to terminate his parental rights.
I don't remember what the date was, but it would have all been around that time.
And then there's the hearing that
authentic
goes
to me.
on for this
I don't
injunction,
remember.
right? And this is in front of Judge Moreland, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you had a 2-day hearing on this.
Yes, ma'am.
Partially, it was a motion for your injunction based on these issues, and it was also Doug's motion to be able to see his child, right?
I believe at some point things got consolidated, but I don't recall specifically.
So at this point, Doug had not seen his daughter.
Correct.
And your daughter was how old?
As of the date, like the last court date,
Yes.
about 6 months old.
And had there been any violence towards you between the time that you filed for this and the time when you had the hearing and she was 6 months old?
He had showed up at night in my driveway, but I mean, there's no physical contact if that's what you're asking.
Okay. And was this a time when they were born?
I don't remember the date of when he was in the driveway.
How about, since we're talking about this, let's talk about the incident you talked about where the neighbor said that Doug was there. Can you tell me about that?
Yes, ma'am. He was outside standing in the yard at night, I guess trying to look in the windows of my house.
And where's this neighbor's house?
She is directly across the street.
Okay. And isn't it true, in fact, that this was very dark? It was very dark out.
Yes, ma'am, it was at night.
Okay. And your neighbor told you that she saw someone in her backyard walking, correct?
That when she confronted him, he kind of ran away.
Okay. She never told you he was at your window
What she said was that he was trying to look in the windows.
in her yard.
The way the houses are situated, where he was standing looking across into the windows of our house. Yes, ma'am.
And she couldn't see who this person was.
Object.
She told you.
She's asking Ms. Benefield about what the neighbor knew.
She told you she could not identify this person.
She said by just looking, as dark as it was, she had a hard time identifying him by his face, but she identified his voice.
That's interesting. So let's talk about that. So when she tells you that there's somebody in her backyard You go to her house, right? You end up
Um,
together with her.
Yes.
All right.
Not at her house, but yes.
And you play a recording that you've recorded, like a voicemail from Doug for her, right?
She believed it was Doug, and she said that she could probably identify his voice because he had a unique voice. And so I played a voicemail I had from him, and she
The
identified him
fact
from
is, she
that.
didn't tell you she thought it was Doug. You just asked her if it was Doug.
I believe she contacted us and said that there was a strange man looking across into our windows, and she was freaked out, and she wasn't sure if it was him.
Okay.
Y'all, this is why we need Ring cameras, man. This is why we need Ring cameras, because that would be like super easy to identify. But I mean, granted, Ashley lived in a gated community. And I'm curious because at this point, did Doug know where she lived? Like, not saying he didn't know she lived in this gated community. He did. Excuse me, but did he know what house it was if it was dark? I could totally buy he's like looking in different windows, trying to figure out, trying to find her car, etc. This, that, and the third. But I mean, this whole testimony about the neighbor seeing him, not seeing him, I would say, like, bring her in. Bring in the neighbor. Let's get the police report. Like, they're talking, they spend a lot of time talking about this. Not a ton of time, but they spend some time talking about this. And I kept waiting for both sides, somebody to show up with a report and going through this, because right now you're just talking about the scenario. We don't even have the witness to testify and confirm or deny and say, yeah, no, that's accurate. I saw there was somebody lurking around the neighborhood. Somebody who seemed unusual, not a neighbor, a stranger. And it's a gated community. So if Doug knew where she lived, I don't know. Maybe he knew the passcode. I don't know. I don't know how people were able to enter and exit that gated community. I know they're all set up differently. Sometimes there's a security guy sitting at the front who buzzes you in, asks you for the number of the house, the name of the person. They call him up. I don't know if he had to put in a pin. I don't know how that works. But I feel like this whole testimony about the neighbor, regardless of whether Ashley's telling the truth or not, or the prosecutors, it's irrelevant to me because the neighbor isn't there to confirm or deny. So, and there's no police report that was entered into evidence either.
I don't remember
So I
specifically.
feel like if you're going to come in, no pun intended, but GUN's a-blazing, like, show us the receipts then.
I'm sorry, this was a long time ago.
And you play a recording of Doug's voice for her.
Yes, ma'am.
And she goes, oh, that's him.
Yes,
That's
ma'am.
the one that was there.
Yes, ma'am.
So that is the ID that Doug was in her backyard.
I believe she also described his body type, his stature. She said he was wearing a baseball cap, which he often did. So I think that
A lot
was
of people wear baseball caps.
She needs to go loud.
I'm sure.
Give your answer before she cuts you off.
I've been able to follow along, so I'll overrule at this point.
There's a lot of people that are 5'9", right?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
A lot of people that weigh 160 pounds.
Yes, ma'am.
A lot of people that wear baseball hats.
Yes, ma'am.
And isn't it true that this person in the backyard said to her, I live around here. I live here.
I believe so. I wasn't there for that part, but that's what I believe she told me.
I mean, that sounds like something Doug would say.
Now I want to move forward to 2019. Around this
So
time,
they saying just like a neighbor
Moreland
was
had already
just lurking around. I mean, like, that's terrifying. I'd be like, holy smokes. That's why, again, like, let's see the receipts on this stuff. Let's see the police report. Let's call in this neighbor, unless this neighbor is no longer with us and they aren't able to call them. But I'm just so curious if they're able to cross-examine on this, and they're able to, and I can't recall if the defense brought this up, but I don't think they did. If they're able to bring this up during cross-examination, then, or regardless, where's the police report? Like, there's no concrete evidence to prove or deny anything that she's saying. Or was there no police report filed? Like, I feel like this is just so irrelevant.
ruled that you could not have your injunction, right?
She denied it. Yes, ma'am.
And that Doug could have immediate visitation with his daughter.
She ordered time sharing. Yes.
Did you start visitation with Doug and Emerson very shortly after that hearing?
Yes, according to the court order. Yes, ma'am.
And you decided you were going to go with him on this
Um,
visitation?
I offered, and he said he would be glad for me to come. So yes, I went.
This person that you lived in a nightmare with, you decided to go with him on this visitation.
Yes.
Why would
Now, the
you
Judge
leave
Moreland
her
hearing, when
alone
she
with
ruled, she made it very clear
She was
that
afraid of him.
she did not see your side.
Sustained.
You had no faith that Judge Moreland was going to help you from that day
Objection.
forward.
Overruled.
You had no faith that Judge Moreland was going to help you from that day forward.
I don't know. They'd say I thought she would never help me, but I mean, she denied the injunction. Yes.
So you go for this visit along with him and Emerson, and that began sort of a, I think Stephanie Murphy called it like a honeymoon period or a happy period piece. Would you agree with that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So during this time, you spent a lot of time with Doug
Yes.
and a lot of time with Emerson,
Yes.
and you weren't scared of Doug at that time.
He was being very kind.
Okay. So you weren't scared of him at that time.
No, I mean, I had things at the back of my mind, but he was being very kind.
So then around summer of 2019, you actually make arrangements with Doug. He's going to move into your mom's house.
He wanted to move in. Yes.
You actually agreed to that.
Not specifically. He didn't really ask my opinion. He told me.
Okay. And then the date that he was supposed to move in, you made plans with him,
Hold on a
correct?
second. Sir, who's crinkling the paper? Is that Mr. O'Keefe? Sir, could you please stop? Thank you. Go ahead.
So during this time, you're speaking with Doug,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And you're talking with him about moving into your home.
He was insistent that we needed to
The
move in
answer is
together.
yes or no, please. You were talking with him.
She interrupting the answer.
If the question calls for yes or no, the questioner has the right to expect a yes or no, or I don't know, or I don't recall,
So
as opposed to a narrative.
you were speaking with Doug about him moving into the house
Yes.
and about his things being moved and when they were going to be moved.
Yes, I'm sure.
And at any time during this, did you say to Doug, no, you're not moving in?
Yes.
You said no.
I'm sorry.
You told him, no, he cannot move in?
Yes, that's why he ultimately didn't move in. As I said,
Okay.
I can't do this.
Isn't it true that, in fact, you didn't tell him no, you just weren't available the day he was supposed to move in?
No, that's not correct.
Okay. So you're saying the day he was supposed to move in, he knew he wasn't supposed to move in? Is that what you're saying?
We had a conversation that day, and I told him that I didn't want him moving in.
Okay. And then you did not take his phone calls. You would not speak with him. I think the word was ghosting. You ghosted him.
I don't know whose word that is, but that's fine. Yes, ma'am.
But visitation continued.
Yes, ma'am.
And you continued to exchange custody of Emerson where? The sheriff's office or?
I believe at the time we were doing the sheriff's office.
And sometime around this time, you show up to this visitation with an engagement ring on, right?
No, ma'am.
Who is Dennis
Nope.
Beatty?
Dennis Beatty.
Beatty. Who is that?
He was a gentleman I dated at one point.
And it was during this time that you were dating him, right?
After I told him not to move in, and then we started just doing time sharing with Emerson. Yes, after that, there was a period of time where we
Okay.
dated. Yes, ma'am.
And isn't it a fact that Doug filed for a divorce after one of these visitations?
I'm not sure when he filed for divorce specifically.
He filed for divorce after he knew that you were dating this other man. Right.
Once again, I'm not sure when he filed.
How did he find out? Did you tell him you were dating him?
No, ma'am.
Okay. How did he find out?
I think he was stalking me.
It wasn't the ring on your finger?
It was not an engagement ring. ma'am.
Well, it was a ring. Did he see the ring on your finger?
I'm not sure what he saw. I wear rings all the time.
So Doug files for divorce.
Sounds reasonable to me. I mean, that's pretty weak. Like, yeah, again, if you're gonna make all these if you're gonna ask all these questions, why not call that witness? Why didn't you call that witness and say, "Hey, were you at?" Like that could have been like a 3-question thing. Hey, who are you? Who are you to Ashley Benefield? Were you guys ever engaged? When did you date? 4 questions. Sorry. Like, I just don't understand introducing these things that are totally, in my opinion, feel like hearsay. Like, they're not. We don't have a witness to testify to prove or deny. Is there a receipt of an engagement ring? No. So, it's just irrelevant. Like, you're just trying to ruffle her feathers and unease her. But she's staying strong. She's sticking to her story. Yeah. I mean, I wear all kinds of rings. Not as many as I want. I want to get more rings and up my ring collection. Right now, I do have my wedding ring. But before I was married, before I was even engaged, I would wear sometimes rings on my ring finger. How many people do that? A lot of people do that. It's not unusual. And I could totally see Doug seeing her wearing a ring, maybe not even on her ring finger, but maybe wearing a ring and being like, what the heck is that? And blowing up and blowing things out of the water. I could totally see that happening and him misinterpreting things and him stalking her and looking at her Facebook. If she had a Facebook, probably did. I could totally see that. I mean, there was a time in my personal situation where I had started taking classes in at this specific studio in New York City while I was also taking classes with my former mentor. I didn't tell anybody. The only people who knew were my family, who did not communicate with him. I told my friends, did not communicate with him. Met him once. And somehow he found out that I was taking classes there. I never posted about it. I never told anybody outside that small, small circle of people. It's called the internet. People can find things out. And regardless, I mean, in my case, I didn't even post anything. But maybe Ashley was posting pictures of her and her new boyfriend. Like, who knows? Or maybe he was posting things or they were just going back and forth. She was liking some of it. And maybe in his brain, he was like, oh my God, they're engaged. Like this, that, and the third. Am I saying it's right that she was dating somebody while they were married? I mean, at this point, it seems like their marriage was pretty much over anyways. And she checked out. And now she's just getting along, going by, getting along, sharing custody because that's what she has to do. So I could totally see Doug blowing things out of proportion. And I don't think it's that hard for people to figure out. Maybe, who knows? Maybe he texted her friends. Her friends maybe who didn't know what was going on. Yeah, or maybe she was posting about it on Facebook. I don't know, but it's like all of this stuff is so silly and ridiculous and doesn't prove or disprove anything because you don't even have evidence to back it up. There's no Facebook posts. There's no bringing in the witness himself. There's no receipt of an engagement ring. So why even bring this up? It's just such a waste of time and just a further way of you trying to like slut shame her.
And all of a sudden you file for, well, you start a bunch of complaints about his treatment of Emerson. What you say, his bad treatment.
Well, she started coming home hurt.
It's a yes or no question. Did you file complaints about his treatment of Emerson?
Yes.
Okay. And you eventually filed for another petition to get an injunction based on those incidences that you claim happened with Emerson.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you complained about the first time and nothing was done. Is that correct? With the police, no charges were filed, nothing was done?
I'm not sure specifically what you're referring to.
The first complaint that was made
About
Emerson and Doug, you agree that you made allegations.
Object. Can we-
Yes.
So they're talking about the ABUSE.
I'm not sure specifically.
Ashley had expressed to police about being afraid he was doing potentially harmful things to their child. I don't know if those are true or not true. I don't know.
During this time, did you speak with members of the sheriff's office?
I'm not sure specifically what time you're referring to.
During the time that there were allegations that Doug was abusing Emerson, did you speak to the sheriff's office?
Yes, ma'am.
On numerous occasions,
I would say so, yes.
at least 5.
Probably yes, ma'am.
And during those conversations, you were making allegations that Doug was abusing Emerson, right?
I was explaining the injury she'd come home with. I mean, I wasn't there. I don't know what happened.
Okay, but you were alleging that Doug was abusing the child.
I was concerned after her pediatrician called CPS and said that she thought she was being abused.
Are you aware that pediatricians are required to call CPS when a mother alleges that?
I didn't allege anything. I brought a video to show her at the appointment, and she called
So you
CPS.
Objection.
Well, after showing her a video of some behavior, she called CPS and she informed me that I was also a mandatory reporter and that it would be negligent if I didn't also call and make a report.
You brought Emerson to the pediatrician specifically for this reason, correct?
No, ma'am, she had her checkup.
But you brought this up to the pediatrician.
At the end, she asked if either of us had any questions.
And that's when you bring up, oh, she must be being abused.
No, I described to her the behavior that I was seeing, and I showed her a video when she came to her own conclusions.
Okay. So you spoke to the sheriff.
So I wonder what that video was. Does anybody know that video? Does it exist? Clearly was not entered into evidence. So again, this is all just like, for me, why are we talking about this? Like, I get why the state is trying to use it and trying to manipulate and twist it. But then call the PD. Wouldn't that be a great witness to call for your case and say, no, like that's not true at all. That's not what she said. And same thing, I feel like for the defense. Now, I don't know if this, again, was a discovery issue and something that they were arguing about in pretrial hearings. I don't know if it came up or not. Maybe you guys know better than I do, but, did this even come up during the Stand Your Ground hearing? I have no idea, but I just feel like this could have been a really excellent witness. I don't know, maybe they tried to get in touch with them. They're no longer living in the state. I don't know. But I feel like, again, this could have been, if you're going to use it and you're going to argue about it, bring in the wit. I feel like this would be huge. If you're trying to say Ashley Benefield is a liar, then call her out. Like, if you give me that and you bring in witnesses who are like, no, she's lying. Like, this is what she does, then okay, I'm on board. But I haven't seen anything or heard from anybody. Certainly not the pediatrician saying, no, this didn't happen. Did all these people are they all dead now? Are they no longer alive where we can't reach out to them and contact them? Like, I don't understand. Wouldn't there be some documentation talking about the visit? And recording what was there? Like, or unless people don't record things at doctors' offices in Florida, I don't know. Am I crazy for like asking these questions? But I feel like that could have even been a great opportunity for the defense. But if that wasn't allowed in, then okay, but then why are we talking about this? You don't have any evidence to support what you're trying to in the you gotcha moment, and you don't have any evidence to disprove either. So it's just so silly to me.
Sheriff's office about that investigation and other investigations, and you about the investigations that Doug was abusing Emerson.
A sheriff usually comes out with the CPI from Child Protection.
And you spoke to them.
I mean, they were there when I was talking, I guess, yes.
And you were talking, making allegations against Doug, assuming that he caused injuries to Emerson.
I'm not sure of my exact words. I was trying to describe to them what I was seeing and my understanding of the situation at the time.
You filed a petition for an injunction based on those things, correct?
At the advice of my attorney, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Whether your attorney advised it or not, you chose to do that, correct?
Yes, I followed the advice of my attorney.
And you were aware that if you went forward on this injunction, that it was going to be in front of Judge Moreland.
Yes, ma'am.
And this injunction hearing was supposed to take place on September 30th of 2020. Yes, 2020.
Yeah, it got moved several times, but that was a date.
Okay. So it was supposed to take place on that day,
Yes, ma'am.
and there were other things pending. Do you know what the other pending items were?
Not specifically.
Okay.
I'm not sure what you're asking.
One of them was Doug's request for a divorce, correct?
Yes, they both filed for divorce at that point. Yes.
So Mr. Benefield filed for divorce, you file an injunction petition, then you file for divorce.
I filed for divorce first.
Okay.
I believe.
And then you're scheduled to have this hearing.
Okay.
Yes.
You see what they're trying to do is, oh no, Doug was the one to file a divorce first, and she said, no, I was. Like, I know it and I'm going to go back real quick. I know it keeps glitching. I might have to hop over to Law and Crime, but the state's trying to poke holes, and Ashley's like, no, that's not true. And again, let's see it. Let's see the divorce filing. Like, I don't understand why some of these things, it could easily be proven by just looking at the dates. Who filed first? Was it Ashley or was it Doug? I mean, why would she testify to that and purposely perjure herself? I mean, I don't know. Maybe she is an evil mastermind, right? But why would you? I mean, perjury is just going to add more time to her sentence. So why would she do that? Why would she lie and say, yeah, I filed first? There's documents. You can easily look that up. And I don't know why some of these questions weren't asked of Faith Brown. It probably because her testimony was limited to certain things. But these are things, it's like little things like this, and this is why I like going back through old testimony, is seeing where the case could have been improved, could have been polished a little bit more, what maybe could have been different, what outcome could have been different in result of it. And would we have been able to come to a better understanding about what possibly might have happened that day? Because I still have no idea. I still have no idea. Was Ashley in fear for her life in that moment? I think she was in fear of Doug, period, leading up to that moment, including that. I think it's totally possible. There's just not enough evidence for me to say that it wasn't possible at all, beyond a reasonable doubt. So this case is just so incredibly fascinating.
9:30, yes.
And you're speaking with Doug during this time, right? I mean, we just heard 200 and whatever text between you and Doug.
Yes, ma'am.
So do you at any time in that say to him, I'm going to go forward with this injunction on Wednesday, on the 30th?
No, ma'am.
In fact, based on those text messages, you were dropping the petition for an injunction.
Yes, we talked. Yes.
No, you talked about it, but you said you were going to.
Yes, ma'am.
And that is what the result of the mediation was, that there was not going to be any immediately because you were reconciling.
Yeah, we agreed, I guess, in order to move to Maryland. And the attorneys were advising us to, if we close things down, that would make it easier, like, legal-wise, for us to relocate.
So you were telling Doug that's what you were going to do.
Legal wise.
Yes, we were
That's
trying
interesting.
to work things out so we could all go to Maryland, yes.
And drop the injunction.
Oh, that's interesting. So to make things easier, it was recommended by their attorneys to say, yeah, it seems like both of you are not going to get what you want here. And you're going to be moving to Maryland anyways, so you might as well just drop it. This is the way I'm interpreting it. You might as well drop and pick up where you left off in Maryland. Or if it seems like you guys are getting along right now, okay, like, again, this goes along with the testimony that later comes into play of, yeah, like, this stuff happens in cycles. Like, things might be going well. Like, okay, cool.
Injunction.
That was one of the things.
And you wanted him to drop everything, right? The motion to release the report, the dissolution of marriage, you wanted him to drop everything.
No, we filed a joint stipulation so we could get the report.
But then you asked him to drop that, didn't you?
I know we kind of went back and forth with so many things.
Okay. You never had any intention of not going forward on your injunction.
Honestly, it was kind of one of those things that some days I thought that maybe I should, and some days I thought that I shouldn't.
So during this 1 week before you shot up, you're talking and you're saying to him things like, oh, we're packing boxes, we're getting everything together. This whole time, you knew you weren't going to stop that injunction hearing.
I hadn't decided yet.
Okay. Your attorney testified that you were going forward on an injunction hearing.
She was advising me to keep it.
Okay. So during this time when you're telling Doug to bring different boxes, bring tape, you asked him to go to Selby Gardens, right?
Yes, we all went. I think we got lunch. We brought Emerson so she could play.
Okay. And you are having conflicted emotions about whether to go forward on an injunction
Yes, ma'am.
while you're out having these types of experiences with them.
Yeah, sometimes things are really good and other times they weren't.
Okay. And so how about, let's see.
Okay. Let's stand her.
This is part of State's Exhibit 98.
Oh, Lord. Sorry about that, y'all. Like, I love how nobody gives, like, a warning to that. That always, like, startles the heck out of me. So this is the video that we heard. I think there was a little bit of a, not a voir dire, but there was some arguments about what could be included, what couldn't be, what the line of questioning was going to be in regards to this video, where they're in, I guess, Panera Bread. It's Ashley, her daughter, Doug, and her mother. They all seem to be getting along. This, I guess, was sent by Doug. I don't know when this video was taken. I know this came up during testimony for the cell phone data expert. So did we find out if this was taken and sent the same day, or was this a older video that was sent I don't know. I don't know.
I don't even know what it's doing. I think it's giving you clues that I gotta guess. Get real. Real.
Working mother, not a working mother.
Working mother, not a working mother.
Not a working mother. I with an A.
Slum. Oh, no, it's running out of time. House. Real house. Wife. Oh, housewives of.
And this video was before you shot him, right?
I don't know the exact date.
When was? I mean, in your mind, it was very close to the time, correct?
Yeah, I'm sure it was right around then. I don't remember when it was.
And during
Okay.
this time,
So it
that
was
you were
shot
having these text messages with
around that
Doug,
time.
and you're planning to move to Maryland. There's no violence going on.
No.
No,
I guess not. No.
he's not hitting you.
No, ma'am.
He's not choking you.
No, ma'am.
He's not shoving you around.
No, ma'am.
So this entire time, there is no violence going on.
I don't know specifically what time frame you're talking about. I'm sorry.
But during this, let's say from 2018 to 2019, when you're not living with him.
I mean, if you classify violence as him, like,
Well, so, and we're going to get to that in a second, but, and I just thought of this, is it seems like it's very possible, and again, this is just me speculating, but I feel like it goes along with Doug seemingly to be charming and, super kind, this super calm person, as Stephanie Murphy described him to be. At home, you're comfortable. It's your house. So it would make sense to me that if he's not living with her and she's living with her mother, why would he display that side in her house? If Ashley lived with him during this period, would things have been different? Yeah, I think the violence would have continued. But because there was that physical separation between the two, and it wasn't them living together, and he wasn't in his own comfort zone, he wasn't in his house, his place, where he can control the situation, who comes in, who goes out, then yeah, I could definitely see there being less physical violence. Doug being on better behavior. Because he's in that I'm trying to get back with you period. I'm trying to get you back into the same house as me. That's why he wanted to move in. Probably. So he could have some kind of control. And she said, no, I don't think that's a good idea. Because last time we lived together, these are the things that happened. And I don't know, maybe those things would have escalated in the mother's home. I don't know. But just going through this again, I mean, these are things where I'm like, yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. All this time between the two, but yeah, they didn't live together. And where did most of this violent behavior take place? Not out in public, behind closed doors, at his home. The place where he felt most comfortable to do these things. Where he could isolate her. So I could also see it from that perspective too.
I'm asking
Punching
if
me or
there's
choking
physical
me.
violence during this time.
He could be rough sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did he ever punch you?
Not during that time, no.
Did he ever hit you?
No, ma'am.
Did he ever use a weapon against you during that time?
Not during that time, no.
So in between the time of 2019 to 2020, where you shot him, was there any physical violence?
Like I said, sometimes he'd be a little rough,
But other than that, he never was physically violent.
He didn't like punch holes in the walls or anything like that, no.
So when I asked
They
you,
didn't
has
live
he been
together.
violent? You said, well, he didn't punch holes in the walls. Is that what you just said?
That's
So-
what I just said, yes, ma'am.
So punching a hole in a wall to you is a definition. When I asked, was he violent? Your definition of that is punching a hole in a wall.
I think that is violent.
Okay.
I'm not
I-
sure what you're asking.
Yeah. What do you think that is,
So-
ma'am? Like, just talk about minimizing. Like, so you're telling me that your beloved husband gets so angry and is waving a gun at you and then chucks it at your head, misses, shoots a firearm into the ceiling of his kitchen, punches a dog unconscious, chucks his 13-year-old cat down the stairs, and punches holes in the wall, that's not violent? I'm sorry, but like, what is a non-violent person to you? Like a monk? And what is a violent person to you? I mean, again, it's like, and this is why, and I'm sure Ashley's having this internal conversation. Like, maybe she's like, maybe I'm making a bigger deal out of all of this than maybe he wasn't being violent. But then it's like you learn and you have to unlearn so many different things when you're in these situations, because people like this will tell you, well, no, that's not what it is. And you're just making it up. And you're just over exaggerating. How invalidating is that? How invalidating. You're not allowed to be afraid. I'm sorry. You tell me how you feel the next time your husband puts a hole through your wall. Tell me you're not going to be afraid of that. Tell me that's not violent. Unless you're the one putting holes through your own walls, ma'am, because this is absolutely deplorable. This is disgusting. It's so invalidating.
Hang on just a second.
I cannot stand this woman. She is a shrew.
So I want to get to the day that all of this happened.
So
This happened on
before we get into this, because she's going to do probably the most disgusting, deplorable thing I've ever seen in my life. And a lot of people have come out from both sides. People who believe she's totally guilty and have also said, like, hey, this was not right, what this prosecutor did. So I just want to give a trigger warning. I know this whole testimony is one big fat trigger warning, but this moment specifically, she is going to ask Ashley about this day, about the series of events that unfolded, and ask Ashley to act it out, which is extremely triggering to watch. So if you are someone who has gone through a similar experience as Ashley, and you need to dip out and you need to take care of yourself, please do. Please don't put yourself through this and watch it if it's going to upset and break you, because it's very disturbing. And I don't want to cause anyone in this community any kind of just upset, because this is absolutely heartbreaking. Now, if you want to stick with me. Let's breathe. It's going to be okay. We're going to get through it. But this is like extremely hard to watch. It's very hard to watch, but it's important. And I think we need to spotlight this, because this is disgusting. This is absolutely disgusting. And I thought things couldn't get worse than Norfolk County. But they can. They absolutely can. This, I think, takes the cake.
on a Sunday, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you're moving on, or you have a hearing on Wednesday,
I believe that's correct.
and
Yes,
you're
ma'am.
moving right after that.
I think the actual day of move was kind of in flux. It seemed like it changed 1,000 times.
You're all getting in the car together, not together, but you're driving cars together to go to Maryland.
I believe he was going to be driving the U-Haul and pulling his truck. And I think that my mom was driving her car and I was driving mine.
And you were telling him during that time that you were going to move to Maryland and attempt to reconcile.
No, ma'am.
You weren't telling him that.
No, not in those words. No.
Did you hear Dr. Broder testify about that? That he said that when you were with Doug,
Objection here, sustained.
so you're denying that you ever told Doug that you were wanting to reconcile with him.
I said I wanted to find a way that we could do things together as a family for Emerson's sake, and that's why we started doing things differently. He wanted to move back in, together, and I told him that I didn't want to do that. I didn't feel comfortable with that.
Did you say that in Dr. Broder's office? In front of Doug?
No, not in front of him.
So
Why
when
would
you're with a
you?
safe person, a psychologist,
Yeah, a safe
You're not telling them.
person.
I'm sorry.
you're saying that you told Doug when it was just the two of you that you didn't want to move in together. And you felt safe telling him, I don't want to move in with you, right? Right.
Yes, we had that conversation many times. Yes.
But you're in front of this psychologist who one would think is a safe environment with Doug, sitting next to you. You hear Doug say to Dr. Broder, we are going to Maryland and we are going to try and reconcile. And you don't feel safe enough to Dr. Broder? No, that's not what I want to do.
I would want to make him look bad in front of somebody else.
Okay.
I wasn't going to disagree with him in front of anybody.
Okay.
Because
So the
what
plan
happens?
was to load up the truck.
What happens if she does? What happens if she does say what she really wants to say in front of somebody else? Because remember, they have this facade. Remember, Stephanie Murphy loved to talk about their They were quite the couple. Saw them in magazines. I saw them here, saw them there. They were quite the couple. It's a facade. Of course, you're going to act and behave a certain way in front of other people. And then behind closed doors, maybe say, yeah, like, I don't think this, like, we have something good going on right now where we're just sharing custody. I'm, we're living separately. We're trying to co-parent. Like, I think this is working for me right now as best as it can. And maybe there were times where she did feel comfortable to talk to Doug. Maybe he was receptive at times to listen to her. I don't know. I don't know what form these conversations were had. If it was in person, if it was over text messages, over the phone. But I can only imagine if she did say something in front of somebody else, in front of Doug, the kind of reaction he would have had when they left.
Get everything done, and then move very shortly after the court hearing, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you had no intention of dropping that injunction. So you knew on the day of that hearing, he was going to know, right?
I'm sorry.
You knew that Doug was going to know that you had no intention of reconciling with him.
We had the conversation many times. I think he understood where I was at.
Okay. You saw the text messages between you and him, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Would you agree that those text messages do not indicate that?
It doesn't say we're getting back together, moving in together.
No,
It
it
doesn't say
didn't.
we're not going to reconcile.
I mean, not specifically. No, I wasn't going to argue.
No, it didn't say they were gonna it said none of that. Stop it. It didn't say they were getting back together. It didn't say that she loved him. She didn't call him baby. She didn't say, "Oh, I want you to move in with me." In fact, when he brought up the U-Haul and the different ways that they could get up to Maryland, she was saying, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna just follow you in my car with the cats." I believe, or not with the cats, with the with her child, their child. So it didn't say anything about them. It didn't, and it also didn't say anything about the injunction. It didn't say any of that. It was just very matter of fact. Of, hey, we're doing this. Hey, do you need Doug persistently asking her, do you need anything? Do you want me to pick this up for you? Do you want me to do that? Him constantly trying to get her to continue the conversation, sending Bible verses. There was no conversation about them reconciling. There was no conversations about that. There was no mere mention or her leading him on and say, wow, you looked really good today. But from him, he said, oh, you look really good in your pajamas on that Zoom call. There was none of that from Ashley. So no. This idea of them reconciling, that's not proof for me. That's not evidence, but what do you guys think?
If you got your injunction on that day, September 30th, how would you have moved together?
Speculative.
What was your plan if that injunction was
Speculative.
granted?
Different question. Overruled.
Objection. Speculative.
No, you can approach.
They're going to approach.
What was your plan about moving to Maryland with them?
I don't know that I really had a plan. I wasn't even sure whether or not I was going to go through the injunction at that point.
Which is what she said before. She said she was back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
Yes.
To help. So you knew Doug was coming over.
Yes.
You invited him over.
Yes.
to help you move stuff in the house,
Well, specifically stuff in the garage, but yes.
stuff in the garage to the truck.
Mhm.
Right. And he came to your house a couple of times. He came and then left and then came back again.
Yeah, I believe he came twice that day.
And there is a gate to your community.
Mhm.
And when he's at the gate, you had to let him in.
Sometimes, because he was frequent in and out, sometimes the gate remembers license plates, and sometimes it opens, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes he would just follow people in. The gate kind of stays open for a while. But yeah, sorry.
But on this day, you weren't concerned about him coming over.
No, I knew he was coming.
Okay. And when he came over, your mother and Emerson went to the park.
I believe they were headed there. I'm not sure. I think they were down the driveway or on the sidewalk, something like that. They were on their way there.
You weren't so afraid that you wanted your mother to stay there and watch.
No, we were just packing to move.
Okay. So you weren't afraid.
I definitely didn't expect this to happen.
So it was of you that your mother left.
Yeah, that time.
Okay. So if I heard you right during your direct, you said he bumped your shoulder twice. Body check. I don't know if that's what you called.
I mean, not for nothing though. Like leading up to that moment, yeah, their conversation seemed to be pretty like, I mean, weird from Doug, but seemed to be pretty like matter of fact. Like I said, like, hey, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. Like she probably, in that moment, no, she probably wasn't afraid necessarily. Yeah, sure. At that point, he hadn't been physically violent towards her. And she probably didn't know, I don't know how long these walks with her mom and Emerson were. But I mean, it seems like she didn't really have a reason to necessarily be specifically afraid in that particular moment. And he was coming over anyways. So
it. He walked into you with a box, right?
Yes.
And then at the end, you say he slapped you.
He hit me. I wouldn't know how to classify it. He struck me. He hit me.
Was his hand open or closed?
I don't
why
remember.
does that matter?
Okay.
Why does that matter?
And because of those things, you claim that you thought he was going to kill you.
He had never hit me before.
Okay. And you thought he was going to kill you.
He wouldn't let me leave. I tried to leave. He stopped me.
The question is, you thought he was going to kill you.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when you were in,
And remember too, up until that point, she said, no, he never hit me. And I feel like if she really was lying, right? Wouldn't she have made all these allegations? It'd be so much more believable, right? If she had said, no, he had this history of kicking me and doing this and doing that. But she's saying, no, he never hit me up until this point, which makes it harder for a lot of people to believe. Well, then why would he just randomly do it now? Well, he has a history of being violent, maybe not physically towards her or at her, not physically making contact with her, but around her. So I could see in that moment, if she's already afraid of him from doing all these other things, punching holes in walls, waving a gun around, throwing it at her, punching the dog, that when he does hit her, excuse me, that, yeah, the possibility of me being severely hurt, maybe even being unalived, is possible. I don't know what he's capable of. I think that's totally believable, in my opinion. It would be so much easier, wouldn't it be, if she did say, and this would be a lie, if she said, no, he's been kicking me and punching me for years. And then if we came to find out there was no evidence proving that, why would she say, no, he never hit me before up until this day? So I could totally see her being afraid for her life and being like, wow, I've never seen him this angry before. This is the warrior side he was talking about. I could definitely see that. I don't know what he's capable of.
in the bedroom, you decided to get your firearm. And it was where?
It was in a storage bin on top of the laundry basket.
Okay. So I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 52. If you could turn around and look at that. Where was your firearm?
It was in the bin on top of the basket.
Here.
That's the basket. laundry
Where was the
basket.
bin?
It's that right on top.
Okay, so it was in here.
Yes, ma'am.
Why would you have a firearm in there?
I had just emptied all the furniture and everything out of my room, and it was kind of like what was left from my drawers, and so it got put in a bin.
Okay, and that was not your only firearm in that room, correct?
Correct.
You had a firearm in the closet.
My carry gun was in my backpack, which was my purse at the time.
So in this room, with a mattress and a broom and a hamper, you had 2 firearms.
Yes.
Why is that so bizarre?
So you go into the room and you grab your firearm.
I don't understand why that's so, like, not believable. Sorry. There we go. Why that's so hard to believe. What is she going to toss it in a box and throw it in the U-Haul? No, it's your GUN. Like, you carry that shit with you. Like, you keep that on your person. She was probably planning on, keeping the one in her purse, which would go with her, obviously. She's going to keep it. She's going to keep it. She's not going to throw it in the U-Haul and let it sit there for a few days in a box. She's not going to toss it in her. She's going to keep it with her. And then when they're ready to go, she's going to throw both of them in the car. I don't understand. Why is that so hard? Yeah, it would be in her room. She packed up everything. They packed, like, why is that so bizarre that there would be 2 firearms? And there's plenty of people who have more than one firearm.
Is it in a holster?
I don't remember.
Okay. And you claim that Doug does what?
He came and slammed the door open. He was standing in the doorway. He said, "You're fucking done."
He said, "You're fucking done." And that made you fear for your life.
Yeah.
Can we turn the lights up, please? Thank you. So he says you're fucking done, and you point the gun and you shoot.
I held it out in front of me first so he could see it. And I said, "Stop."
Judge, if I could have her step down so she can demonstrate.
You may.
If you could just come down.
I mean, this is the most disturbing thing I've ever seen in my life, and so
So Doug opens the
unnecessary.
door and does what?
Standing in the doorway, kind of like this. He said, "You're fucking done." And I held the gun out in front of me and I said, "Stop." He got into this like fighting pose and we like turned sideways. And he was like moving around with his like arms in his hands. And he started like inching forward towards me.
So he why do you call it a fighting stance?
Well, he was like a fighter. Like I don't know, like a ninja or something, I don't know.
Okay, so he's standing there. He turns to like this and starts moving his arms around.
Like that.
Well, show me. What was he doing?
And like I mean, he got like this and he was like making like fighting motions. I don't know, I'm not a fighter, I don't know.
Okay.
It was scary.
Did he have his hands in fists?
Not at that point, they were like, I don't know.
Was he coming at you like this?
And he lunged at me, he came very quickly.
Okay, so he lunged. Was his fist up when he
I
lunged?
don't remember.
So you start shooting, and he does what?
He kept coming at me.
Okay, so then you keep shooting again. And he falls down on his back.
His legs went up in the air.
Okay, where do his legs go?
In the air.
How high in the air?
I don't know.
Do they go over his head?
I don't know if like his feet slipped out.
Okay.
And his feet and his legs went up in the air.
And were you still shooting at the time?
I don't remember.
You can have a seat. So after this incident, you claim that you had swelling to your face, right?
It's going to take a minute. All right, there's the jury. Can you please close up your notes? Put them on your.
I think we all need a minute. After that, it does not get easier the more we watch that. Now I wanna skip very quickly to this video, and I hope it's okay with Dr. G. I mentioned this in my last video. Probably shoot him a message too, but he did a really, really great analysis of her body language. He's a body language expert. I want to play this part of his video just so you can get, because again, I'm not a body language expert. I'm not a psychologist. I am somebody who's been through similar experiences that Ashley has been through. but I think it's important. Let's bring in an expert and see what he has to say about this particular moment. So, and then what say you guys? What say you after hearing Dr. G give his take? Do you agree? Do you think that she's still faking it? Or do you think that it's very possible that she is telling the truth? I'm just going to play this particular moment when she's going through this testimony again. If you need to step away, I completely understand. He talks fast, so I'm going to also keep him at normal.
Standing in the doorway.
All right, so you're seeing the hands twist together. That's already a sign of attempting to calm herself down. People that think that she's being inauthentic, I think that the hand wringing, the way that she's doing that appears authentic, and that appears to be a genuine way to make herself feel calmer as she's doing this.
Okay. Like this. You said your gun. And I held the gun out in front of me and said stop. He got into this like fighting pose where he like turned sideways. And he was like moving around with his like arms and his hands.
Also, the degree of movement when she's talking about the things that he's doing, the things that she's seeing. Now, I want you to keep in mind that when people are lying, oftentimes they try to hide when they can. This doesn't seem to be hiding to me. It seems to be that she's willing to do this. Frankly, this seems torturous to me. You know, the risk that the prosecutor took in having her talk about this and having her get up there and perform this out and basically show everybody what happened. If she dealt with genuine trauma, this is awful. Personally, I hate this. I understand the purpose of why it was done. I get that the prosecutor wanted to show, because she probably believes wholeheartedly that Ashley Benefield did this and wanted to show, look what an actress she is and look how ridiculous this is. But there's also the chance that she didn't do this. There's also the chance that she's having to relive trauma in a courtroom, which is extremely difficult to sit in if you've never been in one. It really is. So the idea of having to do this and talk about real trauma, this is hard to watch.
And he started like inching forward towards me.
So he why do you call it a fighting stance?
He looks like a fighter. Like I don't know, like a ninja or something. I don't know.
Okay.
So listen to how imprecise her language is, like a ninja or something. I don't know. She's talking about things in a way that don't sound prepared in that sense. The way that she's describing things have the right level of confusion around them that I would expect from somebody having to perform something like this in the middle of a courtroom.
So he's standing there. He turns to like this and starts moving his arms around.
She's such a
Well,
bitch.
show me. What was he doing?
Standard.
And like I don't know, he got like this, and he was like making like fighting motions. I don't know. I'm not a fighter. I don't know.
Okay.
It was scary.
Did he have his hands in fists?
Not at that point. They were like, I don't know.
Was he coming at you like this?
And he lunged at me. He came very quickly.
Okay, so he lunged. Was his fist up when he
I
lunged?
don't remember.
Now, if you've never been in court and had an attorney talking to you in an angry way, it is intense. It's very intense. As a psychologist, seeing this bothers me tremendously, if I'm being completely frank.
Was he coming at you like this?
And he lunged at me. He came very quickly.
Okay, so he lunged. Was his fist up when he
I
lunged?
don't remember.
So you start shooting, and he does what?
So right now you can see her rubbing her hands together, covering her body. So when we look at when somebody is telling the truth or whether or not they're lying, people do tend to do self-soothing things when they're lying to calm themselves down, because most people don't like to lie. But it doesn't look like this. The degree of trying to calm herself down, to me, looks like someone who is truly trying to get through talking about trauma. The discomfort, the way that she's moving around. I get that people think that she's faking this. I think this would be harder to fake than you realize. I think that getting all of the different components right would be harder to do than most people probably think.
You're coming at me.
Okay, so then you keep shooting again. And he falls down on his back.
His legs went up in the air.
Okay, where do his legs go?
In the air.
How high in the air?
I don't know.
So when she was saying in the air, she opened her eyes wide, she looked up. It was almost like she was trying to sort of look in her mind's eye and remember what happened. Once again, that leads legitimacy to the fact that she is recalling something she actually saw and not just making things up.
I don't know.
Did they go over his head?
I don't know. It's like his feet slipped out.
Okay.
And his feet and his legs went up in the air.
And were you still shooting at the time?
I don't remember.
You can have a seat.
You know, I think the shaking, because of most people not being used to seeing people do that kind of thing, it makes people feel uncomfortable. They go, well, that's fake. That doesn't look real to me. Most of us, the point of reference for the vast majority of us, for seeing somebody talking about something dramatic or something like this, would be like movies, TV shows. And this isn't how an actor would probably portray it. This isn't what we would normally think of. But for those of us that actually see trauma, work with trauma, talk to people that are traumatized every day, this does look like somebody trying to figure out how to get themselves through this situation and how to try to calm herself down. All right, let's go ahead and stop here. Hopefully this is...
So I'm going to link this video in the description box below. And I'm sorry that I had to play that through again, but I think it's really important to get, because there is so much vitriol and so many people saying, she's faking it, she's a manipulative liar, she's this, she's a great actress. Well, here's somebody who works with traumatized patients all the freaking time, a body language expert. And look, not to say that his opinion is the be and end all, but he is somebody who is an expert in this and can say, and has probably sat in trials similar to this, courtroom similar to this, working with victims similar to Ashley. And he would know. He would know the signs. So I think the way, and I'm happy that he brought this up too, because it rings so true, is the perception that we have and the point of reference that we have of what DV looks like and what trauma looks like and what trauma responses look like is largely from fiction, from TV and film. Actors portraying to their best of ability of what these reactions and responses look like. So yeah, what is actually authentic and real is going to be a lot harder for an actor, no matter how well trained they are, to get, like he said, every single symptom right. It's a lot harder to fake. And if you haven't had a trauma response like that, with the uncontrollable shaking, you haven't had an anxiety attack, then no, you haven't had to relive or recount an experience like that. How can you say she's faking it when you don't know, when your only point of reference is what you've seen on TV? Who are you to say what trauma is supposed to look like? What kind of expert are you? So, if you want to see the full video, I highly recommend. He also does a really good, I think he does a couple of videos on Wendy Adelson, from the Adelson case. She was Dan Markel's wife, who has not been charged with anything, and that is a deeply fascinating case as well. I plan on covering. And he breaks down her testimony because she had to take the stand. There's been multiple trials for that case because there are multiple people involved. Also a Florida case. So if you want to see what somebody potentially faking a traumatic response to something, or faking being upset about the death of her husband, I highly recommend checking out his coverage on that, because it is deeply fascinating. He does a really good job of that. So let's get back to Ashley in court. We're gonna zip past this. It's just more of her crying. She sits there for about probably like 10 or 15 minutes. Notice how the jury isn't there anymore. She doesn't have to perform to anybody. Yeah, you might say, oh, she's performing for the cameras. The cameras not the ones who are going back to the deliberation room and deciding whether or not she's going to go home to her child or if she's gonna spend the next 30 plus years behind bars. So I don't understand that argument either. So she has a little bit more testimony. Then we are going to get into a little bit of Bruce Ferris's testimony, and then we'll wrap things up on this series, just so we can get a deeper understanding of some of the signs. I know we already got into a little bit about body language with Dr. G just now, but I want to cover that as well too. I think it's important. So
By the jury or do any research. Somebody says no. You may resume your cross-examination.
Thank you. Can we dim the lights again, please? Thank you.
yes, can you
So
I can't stand her.
after this incident, you said you had swelling,
Yes, ma'am.
and that would be to the left side of your face,
Yes, ma'am.
and that would be where? Show me where.
Like in this area.
Now I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 103. I'm going to put it up on the big screen. Can you tell me what this is?
It's a picture of me.
And when was it taken?
I have no idea.
Was this taken before you met Doug?
I believe so.
And I'm going to show you Exhibit 104.
Tommy Benefield was like, no. Like, how do you know, bro? You didn't even know who she was. And this is the thing about this photo is we never find out when it was taken. It's never proven or disproven as to when it was taken. So, and not to mention it's a headshot. It's not even a selfie. It's a headshot. It could be highly retouched. Different light. It's also black and white. Like, I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous.
And I'll move it up a little bit.
I think now they're
When
going
was
to
this
show her
picture taken?
mugshot.
I believe in October of 2020.
Wasn't it taken
Right.
on November 4th of 2020?
I believe that's correct. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
The day
I have no further questions.
after. Oh, no, not the day. A few days later. My apologies.
Redirect. All right, man. You can retake your seat. Just leave that exhibit there. No, you can take your water. I meant the paper. There you go.
So that's it. That's it for Ashley. I mean, did we find out when that headshot was taken? Like, let's just go back. Because they're trying to prove that she didn't have swelling on her head.
Picture of me.
Okay.
This area.
Now I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 103. I'm going to put it up on the big screen. Can you tell me what this is?
It's a picture of me.
And when was it taken?
I have no idea.
Was this taken before you met Doug?
I believe so.
And then that's the thing. That's the thing. The attorney never goes, the prosecutor never comes back and says, actually, it was actually dated on this date. Did you know? Like, so why bring it up? Like, it's just so ridiculous and irrelevant. If she doesn't know when it was taken and you don't have any proof to say this was taken the day after this happened, I don't understand what you're trying to prove here. If her mugshot or this photo, not her mugshot, excuse me, this photo, no, it would have been her mugshot. Yeah, it was because it was November 3rd, not September. September 30th is when that hearing was supposed to happen. So sorry, I'm getting my dates mixed up. So I think they're trying to say between this date and her mugshot that which again doesn't make any sense to me because this incident occurred in September. Like, what?
Picture of me.
And when was it taken?
I have no idea.
Was this taken before you met Doug?
I believe so.
And I'm going to show you Exhibit 104. And I'll move it up a little bit. When was this picture taken?
I believe in October of 2020.
Wasn't it taken
Right.
on November 4th of 2020?
I believe that's correct. I'm sorry.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Like, what the hell does that prove? You don't have any date, like, and that's over a month later. So even if she did had swelling and she did have some kind of injury to the face, why would it be there over a month later? It probably would have healed by then, especially if it was just a slap. I don't know. She said it was swelling, but even still, I mean, it what the okay. So now we're gonna get into a little bit of Bruce Ferris's testimony, and then we're gonna wrap things up for this video series. So this says the Daubert hearing. I don't know if this is actually from his testimony in front of the jury, but nevertheless, I mean it's essentially the same thing. It's just I really just want to give you guys some kind of context and education around, if this is something that one you are experiencing and maybe you aren't sure if what the signs that you're seeing are validated enough. I mean, here you go. Here's another expert to tell you that yeah, your feelings are validated, and if you're seeing signs like that, please find safety. I'll include the DV hotline as well too in my description box if you need it. Please take care of yourself, but also too, so we can better understand what may have happened between Ashley and Doug in their relationship and how it doesn't necessarily fit into that stereotypical box and the point of reference that Dr. G was just talking about as to what we consider, trauma responses to be, or toxic relationships or DV relationships to be. One size does not fit all. So
cases and termination of parental rights cases I've been involved with that if she's staying with the abuser and a child, and I like I mentioned, I taught a class for DCF to men and fathers and mothers, and also trained on this a lot, that exposure to a child to trauma is trauma to that children. Separate from the traditional child abuse that we think of hitting the child or not changing the child's diaper, not having food, but actually subjecting the child to the yelling, the screaming, the abuse is trauma to that child. So if a female doesn't report and she's found out, then that can be considered a failure to protect. Now, and she's still a bona fide victim. So now she's being held accountable. Her children might be removed. She's got to go see people like Bruce Ferris for counseling. She's got to do all these classes. So there's and many know this, so they don't want that to be out and about. Also, sometimes I've had women, they still love him. They see the good in him. They feel he didn't have a good childhood, or it doesn't happen often, or maybe I created the problem.
So you mean these aren't split-second decisions?
What specifically?
Do they vacillate sometimes when children are involved?
No.
Should I leave? Should I stay?
I like to think of it as an evolution to leaving. But what's the motivation? If you're in that isolated situation of just he's the one, he's your world. Where's the education? Where's the involvement? That's what the role of a lot of our domestic violence shelters are in outreach, and is to involve and educate. And yes, here's services you can have, here's someplace you can safely go. But that denial that violence will happen again is not uncommon. That feeling that it was her fault. Religious reasons. I'm always kind of surprised that, and I mean no ill towards any religious group. I don't mean to say that, but I found sometimes ministers or churches, very concerned about marriages or not getting divorced, and they actually recommend or counsel people to stay together that are hurting each other. And so that's an issue. This idea that he will hurt her if she leaves.
And remember, Ashley and Doug were both apparently, a lot of people said that they were both religious. I don't know. I could believe it, right? I could definitely believe it. That they shared some of the same values, and maybe that's part of what attracted Ashley to Doug and vice versa. But we know Doug was definitely using religion as a way to, I don't know, control, manipulate. God made you for me. Righteousness, the path of righteousness.
In this quote, I'd rather see you dead than with someone else, is not uncommon. And also the total power and control continuum and the use of that to control their partners.
Is there a particular time in these kinds of abusive relationships when violence is most likely?
Definitely. The most violent time is when she goes to leave and he knows about it, or he's there.
In other words, when he forms the perception that the realization sets in that this is the end?
When she eventually puts her foot down and makes that clear, that's, and I know from my certifications doing fatality reviews with Johns Hopkins University, that's in danger assessments. There's a high probability of fatalities or extreme bodily harm at that time. It's very dangerous. When we do many shelters and victim advocates that might be affiliated with the state attorney's office or wherever, they try to establish a safety plan with victims, and that plan will include, don't. When you leave, it's when he's not home. Don't do it when he's home, and also have a safe, unknown location to go to. I have many stories I could tell of women being hunted down and actually killed because of he knew where they were, and that the trauma of that. I don't, even though I work in this field and I've been doing it for 20 years, it's hard for me to conceive that cloud over me of being subjected to being violently hurt. And if I am, who's going to raise my child, and will he hurt my child also? It's overwhelming for those victims, and I certainly see that in my practice, my counseling practice.
So let me ask you this as we close. Given your education and experience as a law enforcement officer, tell me, is there a general bias against females by males?
I think there is. Some different social ethnic groups, different cultures. Like I think I mentioned earlier, ownership of women. I've had, without mentioning the countries, I've been in, like I say, Gainesville is a little stewing pot of people from all over the world. I've run into men who actually thought it was okay to abuse their wife because they thought she belonged to him. And I said, sir, this is America. That's not how it works. So this ownership can be cultural.
Just
it can be.
It's so interesting. There is another case. This is old. An older case. I think it happened in the early 2010s. But these two daughters, I forget what race they were. But there's a documentary on Hulu, I believe, called Price of Honor, and it speaks very much to this, where the father actually unalived both of his daughters. He was a taxi driver. I forget where. I forget, but I can do some digging on it. Very disturbing. He was a highly, highly abusive man, and he was like weirdly obsessed with like his daughters, and they wanted like nothing to do. I think at one point he kidnapped them and took them back to their home country. Then they came back, and one day he, I guess, somehow convinced them to take a ride with him, and he ended up shooting them. One of them, as she was making the 911 call, passed. Extremely heartbreaking case, but it very, very similar to what he's describing here, because again, depending on the culture, it's very different. It's very, very different, the way that people perceive abuse in all these different countries and culturally. And that's why I think it's important for us to have these conversations. And I wish platforms like YouTube would allow us to do in more of a free form way and use the words that we need to, because these are important conversations and we need to educate each other. We need to learn that, again, it's not just a United States thing. It's a global issue and something that we need to continue having conversations about, respectful discussions about.
Hated by social norms, what their parents did. Certainly the media and entertainment plays a big part towards women and male roles in our society.
And where can this bias be found?
Everywhere.
Everywhere
in society.
Including our institutions?
Including institutions.
And would those institutions include law enforcement?
Law enforcement, and of course I worked in law enforcement, and I was always surprised at how I constantly had to I actually became a little internal affairs detective for my officers who didn't understand domestic violence and had biases. And I was always surprised of the biases and found sometimes they were personal. An officer's going through a divorce. So all of a sudden he's at a crime scene and he treats the female badly because of his own world, not enforcing the law appropriately. But yes, it could be, not, and also not everyone reacts the same way as a victim to domestic violence, and especially with other people. Some people have developed a very fat affect. In other words, they don't show emotion. Yep. And that's their coping skill. They actually shut down. They do this dissociative sort of thing. Other people become hysterical and exaggerated in describing. So every person is different. Just because you...
All right.
God, like, I don't think, I think this is the Daubert hearing, but I don't know. But yeah, I mean, based on what we just saw, based on Dr. G's breakdown on her body language, specifically during the most difficult part, the part where everybody's like, she's such a great actress. I think he broke down Amber Heard's testimony as well too. So like, yeah, like let's compare the two and let's look at somebody who's faking it and somebody who could very well be reliving an extremely traumatic experience, and seems very likely is. But yeah, you could totally dissociate. I know how many times, and it's a very weird feeling when your body shuts down. It is like a buzzing, like numbing feeling. You don't know what's happening. You feel almost like I've never had sleep paralysis, but I know a lot of people explain this to me who have experienced sleep paralysis is, you're awake, like you're aware of your situation, but your body cannot move no matter how hard you try, like you're just stuck. And it's like this nightmarish, like crazy, freaky feeling. That's exactly how it feels when you're dissociating. And the trauma is happening, whether it's like during the experience or not, or after the fact and when you're talking about it sometimes. And like that's how it is for me. Like sometimes I can talk about my trauma like this. And I'm not going into specifics, but I can talk about it in a free form way and be normal and seem fine and cool, whatever. But then other times I'm like on the verge of breaking down, and I'm going through it and I'm reliving it, and my body changes. Your body changes because your body is smart. Your body does what it needs to do to protect itself. And when we saw just a few moments ago, Ashley self-soothing, Ashley rubbing her arms, Ashley like kind of hunched, like her shoulders curled in, looking down, just very like tight, almost like kind of like robotic with her arms, like not really intentional. She couldn't even hold up her arm and make a full GUN like point. And some people might be able to speak about their trauma completely differently. And that's why I think it's so important that we take these cases seriously and we break them down and we ask questions and we ask it, is this possible? Instead of jumping to conclusions and saying, she's a liar, she's manipulative, she's this. Well, show me the evidence that proves that. Because I didn't see any of that come out throughout any of this testimony or any of this trial. What I did see is that Doug had violent tendencies. And I can very well believe her being afraid in that moment. Because if he never hit her before, and that was the first time, and she knew what he was capable back then when he didn't hit her, yeah, I could totally see, yep, death is definitely on the table today. Like that, I feel like that's totally reasonable for somebody to believe, and call me biased, I don't care. I don't care. That's my opinion. That's my opinion. If you think differently and you have the evidence, back it up, please share it with me. But don't just throw out these flippant comments and say, she's faking it, she's a girl, she's this. Where's the evidence? Show me. Show me. Pull up a link. Post a screenshot. Show me. I want to see it because I have not seen any of it.
Lastly, do uninformed professionals, in your experience, cops, judges, lawyers, counselors, often fail to recognize the signs of domestic violence?
They do, and sometimes it's because they're not obvious and they're hidden, or they don't understand the dynamic of domestic violence, and they don't necessarily understand that that victim was in fear. And though it may not show, they may be smiling in a photo, or their family or someone doesn't know about it. That doesn't necessarily speak to what was going on.
All right. Now, would you be able to relate these principles to the facts of a domestic violence case with any kind of reliability?
100%.
Have you done that before?
Routinely.
Is that what you in fact do as a professional?
It's one of the major things I do. I might put as a footnote, I'm a therapist. So sometimes clients come to me and I'm helping them with their anxiety and their depression and generalized mental health issues. But many of my clients, because I focus on domestic violence, I'm helping them understand, or the perpetrators, I'm helping them change their attitudes, usually through what I call cognitive behavioral therapy. And I could go on and on.
All right. Could you make that application and its reliability by studying the facts and documents relative to a particular case?
Actually, this is one of my professions.
All right.
I'm hired by the state for cases doing domestic violence assessments, and sometimes I never get to.
He's hired by the state too. You know who else has been hired by the state? Dr. Lou, I believe her name is, the expert witnessed the defense calls at one point to walk through and pretty much confirming what Dr. Vega said, that ME, going through the same thing. And then we heard during closing arguments how the prosecution likes to discredit everybody, even their own witnesses, about their testimony because Ashley's manipulating everybody. It's just so wild to me. And I lied. I want to get into okay, they're making arguments here about Bruce Ferris's testimony. I think the prosecution has a couple questions. Yeah, so I'm gonna get into a little bit. Oh, I cannot stand Cruella de Vil. We're gonna get into that, and then I want to play a little bit of the lead investigator's testimony, Detective Warren, who Dr. Gillum didn't know was the lead investigator, but he contacted him. Yeah, so we're gonna get into a little bit of that because that before when Taylor was digging into him about, hey, like, is it possible for law enforcement to have biases? And Bruce Ferris, who was a former detective and is now a licensed therapist, say, yeah, it's possible. I've seen it on the scene. Like, of course it's possible. You know, they always say don't take work home with you, but also don't take home to work sometimes. So yeah, it's totally possible. Because remember, Detective Warren made that comment about how all homicides are murders, which is
And also, what was
legally not
Alexasrewm
correct.
Ellen.
is the same there.
I want to skip ahead.
Speaking to her.
There we go. Here's Cruella.
PSS.
And how did you interview Did you speak to Miss Benefield?
I did speak to her.
And for how long?
I spoke to her multiple times with a Zoom call.
Okay, my question was how long? How much time did you spend speaking to her?
It varied a little bit for an hour. Most of the times it was 2 hours.
I mean,
That's so weird. Like, that's such a dumb question. Like, I asked how long. Like, how long what? How long was each session? Did you meet? Like, a better question would have been like, how many times did you meet? Oh, a handful of times. How long were those sessions? Like, what? Prosecutors, and she's like, she thinks she's so smart too, which is so funny because like in her closing arguments, and I don't care, I'm gonna drag the heck out of her because she's just such a disgrace to the Florida bar. She was like, I was asking him like really easy, straightforward questions. It's like, no, you're not. Like, your questions make no sense, ma'am. Like, do not disrespect this man. This man he's done his time. Like, he knows what he's talking about.
I need you to add it up. Did you speak to her 1 hour total, 3 hours total?
Oh, total time?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry if my question wasn't clear.
I'm
It
going
wasn't.
just by memory. I'd be guessing a little bit here, so I apologize. Could have been just trying to could have been 15 to 20 hours easily.
So you spent 15 to 20 hours speaking to Miss Benefield.
I did
Okay. And did you review paperwork in this case?
a lot. That's how I came to my conclusions uniquely from the paperwork.
When you say uniquely from the paperwork, are you telling this court that you spent 15 to 20 hours with Miss Benefield, but you didn't base the opinions that you gave previously in a depot on that time?
That's true. I did not do an assessment of her. I was not hired to do an assessment. I did not produce an assessment.
Well, what were you doing for 15 to 20 hours?
Some of it was being a counselor, and some of it was I have a reputation to keep, and I wanted to understand this really a victim? So kind of got into a routine of understanding some timeline with her about what occurred and how did it fit the facts that I was reading about.
Well, wouldn't that say, if what you just said is you needed to determine if she was a real victim, then it must have come into your decision making about this case, with that assessment you made. Is that correct?
Could you restate the question?
Well,
please?
you just testified that you spent 15 to 20 hours with Miss Benefield, and part of that was to make an assessment on whether or not she was a real victim. And
No.
so,
Not to make an assessment as I compared the facts that I knew from what I was reading. I wanted some validity, and then some of my time was being empathetic and listening to her.
And-
But my conclusions I've come to that I talk about in the deposition were 100% from the discovery. Those are the items, and I could list them for you if you'd like.
Did they include the stand your ground motion filed by Mr. Taylor and the defendant?
At the time, that was one of the items. Certainly, if I subtract that from what the things he quotes in the stand your ground were other discovery items. Doug admitting to shooting the gun into the ceiling, him telling that to his priest, and phone calls and texts. So I didn't need the stand your ground paperwork document
Yeah,
to
this is
find
the
all
hearing.
those bits of information that I found through looking at discovery.
This is the hearing because I think at one point during his actual testimony, he gets into this, and then the state cuts him off like, "Oh, objection! Like you can't talk about that." But that's also interesting. So here's another witness. This is an outside party who is saying, just aside from the punching, yes, we've heard about that, the punching of the walls, the firing off the firearm, but he also says he has also confessed to his pastors about doing these things. Which is interesting. Which is interesting because now I don't, and this isn't because I know every church is different, and I don't know what kind of obligations pastors have over priests. If somebody comes to confession and says, "Hey, I did this terrible thing," if they have any obligation to report that to the police, or if that is privileged between them and God. Like I don't know. Does anybody know? I don't know what faith too that Ashley and Doug believed in. But pastors, if they're seeing pastors, and they're not Roman Catholic, which is the church that I grew up in. So I'm curious if anybody knows what kind of faith that they followed, and if there's any obligation that pastors have to report something like that. Generally curious.
Well, so the portions of the stand your ground about what happened that night were not in discovery. That Mr. Benefield took a bladed stance and did this.
No, I didn't. Those items were not part of my conclusion. I can tell you I have 13 items I use uniquely in discovery that came to my conclusion on, and it didn't include. And I never spoke to Ms. Benefield about what you just said about bladed stance. I never talked to her about that.
Well, you said you spoke to her to determine if she was I guess to determine her veracity. Is that what you're trying to say?
That's one word, but I never spoke to her about the event of the shooting. Never.
Okay. Did you speak to her about the other things that were in the stand your ground hearing and the discovery from things that had occurred in the past?
I think some of the things did. Yes. As I think about, the as she's going, basically she did some timeline understanding, when they met up until before the event, and some of those items were in there.
And did you develop an opinion as to whether or not Ms. Benefield was a battered spouse? Like as far as battered spouse syndrome, if you would say that she suffered from battered spouse syndrome?
Yeah, I did not determine that. I determined that she was a victim of domestic violence, and that Doug was the perpetrator of that.
Based on
all the discovery and how it fits in with the continuum of power and control, and her compliance, her fear, etc.
I don't have anything else, Judge. Thanks. Thank you, sir.
Tell us what you reviewed.
I reviewed a deposition that Doug gave, and I had a written version. He makes admissions. He talks about the gunshot. He talks about punching the dog, throwing the gun, punching holes in the wall. There was a letter to his pastor where Doug admits punching a hole in the wall and shooting the gun in the ceiling. There was a domestic violence injunction in South Carolina prohibiting mutual contact, and the text of that. The really important piece of evidence for me was Ashley wrote a letter on September 18th, 2017, when she separated, outlining domestic violence that Doug did to her. I have a copy of that if you want me to go through the items, but she outlines, without necessarily being a domestic violence counselor at all. It all fits very discreetly into what power and control and what abused women experience at the hands of their abusers. And also for me, if I might say, that was a frozen moment in time. That wasn't something that she said after I met her or something like that. This was from 2017.
And were you struck by the terms of basically art that she unwittingly included in that letter as it relates to domestic violence and the power continuum?
It was it's a letter that I can use in training other people to counsel domestic violence victims, or if I was to work with a group of batterers, etc. It's classic.
Okay, what else?
I mean, like, if only that letter was able, to come in, where she's outlining it. Like, so much just good stuff came out of that that testimony, and that was from the Daubert hearing. So before he actually took the stand in front of the jury, but like, oh my gosh, like he's admitting it to pastors now, which is why I'm curious if anybody knows again what faith they followed, what if there's any rules between like if they have any obligation, if that's something at a choice that they do. I know that there was I think she goes by Notorious Jules on Twitter. But she was sitting in the courtroom. This woman who also is pretty known in the true crime space, I believe. I came across her through Melanie Little's channel, but she was sitting in the courtroom and she was I totally like blanked and lost my thought. Oh no, she had said, sorry, brain fart. It's late, guys. She had said that there were a couple of pastors that were sitting on Ashley's side. So I'm curious if those were the same pastors that Doug had spoken to, if those are pastors that Ashley had spoken to, or that they had both mutually known. I don't know, but I think that's interesting. I mean, I've never seen that in a trial where there were several pastors sitting on the defendant's side. Curious if there were any pastors sitting on the Doug Benefield side. So now I want to go into believe this is Detective Warren. Yep. Okay, cool. So we're going to just quickly play through a little bit of his testimony. Just because, again, this was the lead investigator who the state never called. And that's always interesting when the state doesn't call. Who would likely be their star witness, would they not?
Did you
What?
speak with the medical examiner yourself before you submitted your arrest warrant in this case?
Well, like I said earlier, we have a detective that will go to the scene or to the medical examiner's office to get the preliminary findings.
Let me repeat my question, Detective. Did you personally speak with the medical examiner before you submitted your arrest warrant in this case?
Not that I can recall.
This refreshes your recollection.
Sure. Okay. Yes, sir. Yeah, so I spoke to him on October 29th in reference to stippling.
You documented in your report, did you not?
Yes, sir.
All right, my last question, Detective. Do you recall filling out a supplemental report on November 16th of 2020?
I filled out a lot of reports, sir. May I look at it just to verify? Okay.
Is that your report?
It appears to be. Yes, sir.
All right, can you tell us the date of the report?
November 16th at 15:10 hours.
November 16th of 2020?
Yes, sir.
All right. Let me ask you if there is a provision in this report for you to note whether or not any bias or motivation is demonstrated by the offender towards the victim.
It's a program that's got a lot of different stuff, so there could be possibly, sure.
All right, let me ask you this. Under bias and motivation,
Okay.
did you put in none?
Well, it would have just been not filled out. It auto-populates. Like I said, it's a program, and I'm not a programmer, so I apologize.
So if you had been aware of bias on behalf of Ashley Benefield towards Doug Benefield, such as ill will, spite, evil intent, things of that nature, you would have noted it, would you not?
Honestly, it probably would have been just documented in the report.
No further questions.
Cross.
I mean, that was huge. That was huge. That was huge because remember, they needed ill will and depravity they needed to prove that in order to get the second degree. So I don't know what the exact linchpin in that would have been. I think it was a great move for the defense to call him, especially and just as it was a pretty short testimony, but I think this was probably one of the big things that sealed the deal for, aside from the Faith Brown email stuff. I mean, maybe not. This could have been the real sticking point. I'd be curious to hear from any jurors what what went down, but I feel like this was probably huge because if the lead investigator, I mean, the guy who thinks that all homicides are murders, right? Says that no, there wasn't any bias, there wasn't any ill will or from what I can see or depravity. Okay, so I'm curious to know if the charges, and please guys let me know in the comment section below. I'm still going through comments from previous videos, but if she was initially charged with manslaughter, if that was bumped up to second degree at a later point. I don't know, but I feel like in a lot of ways the prosecution, much like the Commonwealth, overplaying their hand with a lot of things. So now we'll get into cross.
This section that says bias, isn't this for hate crimes?
Yes, ma'am. When we fill out certain areas for certain crimes, it's required for statistical reporting and things, and a lot of things that I'm not even aware of. I don't typically pay attention to that box. But
So this box is for those kind of statistics, not for any kind of bias that may be going on in this case.
correct.
Thank you.
Redirect.
Do you think that either jury will lead detective?
Objection beyond scope.
Sustained.
Nothing further.
Can this witness be released?
Yes.
No.
You remain under subpoena, sir. The instructions I gave you about sequestration remain in force.
Do I need to stay in the building?
That was friggin' awesome. I like how he tried to get in there. And Taylor's sneaky like that. Like he knows. And I think sometimes he likes to play like, I'm the old man, I can't hear anything. But I think it's part of his strategic tactic. But the prosecution was quick on that. Like, no, you can't ask that. You can't ask that question. But yeah, like, why didn't you call? Why didn't you call the lead investigator? Even the Commonwealth knew they had to call Proctor. Come on now, Florida. Come on now, Manatee County. But anyways, with all that being said, this wraps up the final installment in the Ashley Benefield series. Now, of course, we're going to be following this case. We still don't have a sentencing date. So once we do that, I'll probably do a live stream if you guys want. And we'll see what the sentencing is. I'm sure Eva Benefield is going to make a statement at that hearing as well, too. She's been pretty vocal about her feelings regarding the verdict. So I expect her probably making some kind of victim impact statement as well, too. I don't know if we'll hear from creepy cousin Tommy. I'm sure we will because he likes to be on the camera as well, too. I also think Douglas Benefield's brother has also recently come out. I'm curious as to why he didn't testify and why they had Tommy testify over him. So a lot of interesting stuff. But nevertheless, I'll probably do a live stream and if more updates regarding the appeal. It seems like the defense wants to appeal this. So we will see. We'll be following. But for now, that wraps things up on our end with this trial. And thank you so much for being on this journey with me. I know there's a lot of conflicting opinions. A lot of people believe that she's a complete liar and a manipulator and that Doug didn't deserve it. And some people even believe Doug was not violent and that all of these allegations that Ashley had made are completely unfounded, as Stephanie Murphy liked to say. Some people thought she was a credible witness, and then other people don't. Other people believe Ashley's story and believe that she genuinely was in fear for her life in that particular moment. And regardless of what you feel, guys, you can think whatever you want. We are allowed, we are entitled to have our own opinions because guess what? We have that ability, at least in this country, to believe and to use free speech and to share those opinions and express them. But I always encourage you to keep it kind and respectful. In the comments section below, if you have an opinion and you're strong, I get it. These things they get people heated. I get heated. I got heated throughout this entire series because this is something that hits home for me, something that I have a deep understanding of. And I can understand it's difficult for some people to wrap their heads around it because, maybe you haven't experienced something like this and it does seem black and white to you and you feel like right is right and wrong is wrong. And I get that. I get that. We are allowed to disagree. We are allowed to agree to disagree. And that's what I love about this community. But just please, 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 please keep it kind, keep it respectful. There are people who are DV survivors. There are people who are probably going through the same exact situation right now. And as we've heard from some experts in this entire trial that no, it's not black and white. DV is not one size fits all. There are many different warning signs. There are many different things that can constitute as DV, and I just want to take this as a learning experience. And I hope that within this time, Ashley, Doug's family as well, find some peace and healing. I think everybody needs that. I also hope for that too for, you know, the other victims in this case, which is Eva Benefield as well as Ashley and Doug's daughter, Emerson. So I really hope that everybody can learn something from this, can find some peace and healing, and that we can just all make this world a little bit safer and kinder. And that if we do recognize these signs, or you have a family or friend, family member or friend who is going through something like this, and you see something that maybe they aren't seeing, or maybe they're afraid to talk about, just let them know that they have a safe space. And if you need a safe space, you have it right here at Alexasrewm, and I'm here for you. I'm fighting for you, and I appreciate the absolute heck out of you. So that being said, thank you so much for watching. If you thought something was interesting, if you thought this video was interesting, I don't want to say if you enjoyed this video. This stuff is not enjoyable to listen to talk about, but it's important. So if you thought today's video was interesting and you thought you learned something positive out of it, you got something out of it, make sure you hit that subscribe button so I can continue creating more videos like this and having more conversations around topics that are difficult to have, including DV. Make sure you hit the notification bell so you don't miss that next video from me. And make sure you hit that like button, because that tells the YouTube algorithm these stories are important to share. And these are topics that you guys want to be continuing to talk about. It's free to do. It doesn't cost you anything. And I would greatly appreciate it. So next video, we're going to be probably talking about even more difficult things. If you have case suggestions, drop them off in the comment section below. I'm thinking we might get into some of the Nikki McCain stuff as well as the Mr. Beast allegations, because it's not the same, but kind of similar to this. But we might also need a little bit of break from all that. So let me know what you guys want to hear about next and talk about next, and I will see you in that next video. All right, take care and stay safe.